The bedroom door locked behind him with a sound like the closing of a tomb. Eliza stood frozen in her wedding gown, the lace suddenly too tight, watching as Duke Rowan Ashford turned to face her with eyes colder than winter stone. No tenderness, no pretense. When he spoke, his voice was surgical. Understand this clearly. You are here to give me an heir, nothing more. Do not mistake duty for affection. The words landed like blows, each one precise and devastating. This was her wedding night, this was her future. But what Rowan Ashford didn't know, what he couldn't possibly see in that moment, was that he had just made a catastrophic miscalculation, because Eliza Thornfield wasn't the fragile ornament he assumed he'd married, and the war he'd started with those words would reshape everything he thought he controlled. This is a story about power, the kind you're born with, and the kind you build when you have nothing left to lose. Stay with me until the end, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The reception had been magnificent. Eliza remembered that with bitter clarity as she stood in the center of the Duke's bedroom, her wedding dress feeling less like a gown and more like a costume she couldn't remove. Crystal chandeliers, hundreds of guests, champagne that probably cost more than her family's annual income. Her mother had wept. Her father had gripped her hand with trembling fingers and whispered, "You've saved us all." Saved. What a peculiar word for selling yourself. "Are you listening to me?" Rowan's voice cut through her thoughts. He hadn't moved from his position by the door, arms crossed, still wearing his formal jacket though he'd loosened his collar. Even disheveled, he looked every inch the aristocrat. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair swept back, a face that belonged on currency. Handsome in the way a blade is handsome. "Yes," Eliza said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I heard you. An heir, nothing more." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe that she'd responded without tears or pleading. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Good. Then we understand each other." He moved toward the adjoining door that led to his private chambers. "Your rooms are through there. The connecting door will remain unlocked for practical purposes, but do not enter uninvited." "And when exactly am I invited?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Rowan paused, hand on the doorknob. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. "When it's necessary. My secretary will inform you of the schedule." A schedule. Eliza felt something dangerous rising in her chest. Not quite laughter, not quite rage. How romantic. "Romance," Rowan said, enunciating each syllable with cutting precision, "is a luxury neither of us can afford. Your family was drowning in debt. Mine requires an heir. This is a transaction, Lady Ashford. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." Lady Ashford. The title felt like a collar. "I see," she said quietly. "Then I suppose I should thank you for your honesty, if nothing else. Honesty is efficient." He studied her for a moment, and she had the unsettling sensation of being catalogued, assessed, and filed away. "You're taking this better than I expected." "What did you expect? Hysterics?" "Most women would—" He stopped himself. "Would what? Cry? Beg you to reconsider?" Eliza stepped out of her shoes, suddenly exhausted by the weight of the day, the dress, the pretense. "Tell me, Your Grace, would tears change anything?" The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. "No," he said finally. "They wouldn't." "Then I won't waste them." For the first time since they'd entered the room, something like respect crossed his features. It was brief, a shadow, nothing more. But Eliza caught it and filed it away. "The staff will help you in the morning," Rowan said, already turning away. "Mrs. Brennan runs the household. She'll explain your duties." "My duties as the Duchess," Eliza said. "It wasn't a question. Your duties as my wife." He opened the door to his chambers, which aside from the production of an heir, are largely ceremonial. "Don't interfere with estate management. Don't countermand my instructions. Don't create complications." "Don't exist too loudly," Eliza murmured. Rowan's hand tightened on the door handle. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Eliza met his gaze without flinching. Let him see that she wasn't broken. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Good night, Lady Ashford," he said, and closed the door between them. Eliza stood alone in the vast bedroom, listening to the echo of her own breathing. The fire in the hearth crackled softly. Outside, she could hear the distant sounds of the reception still continuing in the gardens below. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses toasting a marriage that had died before it began. She walked to the mirror and stared at her reflection. The girl looking back was a stranger. Hair artfully arranged, makeup flawless, wearing a dress that cost more than everything she'd owned in her previous life combined. Behind her, the room stretched out like a museum. Antique furniture, oil paintings of disapproving ancestors, silk wallpaper in shades of cream and gold. Beautiful. Empty. Cold. Eliza reached up and began removing the pins from her hair, one by one. Her hands didn't shake. That surprised her. "You will survive this," she told her reflection, "and you will not beg." The words felt like an oath. Damn. The morning came with a knock so soft Eliza almost missed it. "My lady?" A woman's voice, older, respectful, but not warm. "May I enter?" Eliza sat up in the enormous bed where she'd barely slept. "Yes." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a housekeeper's black dress and white apron. Her face was weathered but intelligent. Her posture military straight. "Mrs. Brennan," the woman said, executing a small curtsy. "I manage Ashford Manor. His Grace asked me to attend to you this morning." "Of course he did." Eliza pushed back the covers. "He mentioned you last night." Mrs. Brennan's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she'd heard the edge in Eliza's voice. "I've brought tea, my lady, and I thought we might discuss your schedule." "The schedule," Eliza repeated. "Yes, I'd hate to interfere with anything important." This time, the faintest hint of sympathy crossed the housekeeper's features. "I've served the Ashford family for 30 years, my lady. I understand that these arrangements can be difficult." "Do you?" Eliza stood, wrapping herself in the robe that had been laid out. "Were you also informed you were nothing more than a means to an end on your wedding night?" Mrs. Brennan's spine stiffened, not with offense, with recognition. "No," she said quietly, "but I was a servant when I married the estate manager, which, in its way, was equally transactional." She poured tea with steady hands. "The difference, if you'll permit me to say so, is that I knew my place from the beginning. You, I suspect, believed you were entering a partnership." The accuracy of it stung. "I was foolish," Eliza said. "You were hopeful." "That's not the same thing." Mrs. Brennan handed her the cup. "Now drink this, and I'll explain how this household actually functions. Because whatever His Grace may have told you about ceremonial duties, the truth is rather different." Eliza sipped the tea, perfectly prepared, slightly sweet, and waited. "Ashford Manor employs 43 people," Mrs. Brennan continued. "The estate itself supports over 300 tenant families. The Duke manages the land and the business interests, but the household, the staff, the social obligations, the community relations, those have always fallen to the Duchess." She paused. "Or they did before the previous Duchess died 5 years ago." "Rowan's mother? Yes. Since then, His Grace has attempted to manage everything himself, with varying degrees of success." Mrs. Brennan's tone was carefully neutral, but the implication was clear. "He is not naturally suited to the interpersonal aspects of the role." Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. "You're being diplomatic." "I'm being employed, my lady. There's a difference. So I'm here to... what? Manage his social calendar, pour tea for the local gentry? Among other things." Mrs. Brennan pulled out a small notebook. "The spring charity drive begins next week. The tenant families need their quarterly reviews. The servants' wages need reconciling. The harvest festival requires planning. The estate doctor needs authorization for medical supplies. 3 tenant children need schooling arrangements. The roof on the west wing needs repair approval. Stop." Eliza held up her hand. "All of that has been neglected? His Grace handles the major financial decisions. Everything else..." Mrs. Brennan's silence was eloquent. "Everything else falls apart slowly," Eliza finished, or quickly, depending on the season. Eliza set down her teacup and moved to the window. Below, she could see the estate grounds stretching out in careful geometric patterns. Gardens, pathways, fountains, and beyond that the farmland that sustained it all. People were already working, tiny figures moving with purpose through the morning light, all of them depending on a household that had been running on autopilot for 5 years. Why didn't anyone else step in? She asked. The Duke's aunt offered. He declined. His cousin Philip suggested hiring professional management, also declined. Mrs. Brennan's voice was carefully measured. His Grace does not delegate easily, except to me, apparently. You are the Duchess. These duties are traditionally yours. Mrs. Brennan joined her at the window. The question, my lady, is whether you'll accept them. Eliza thought of Rowan's words the night before. Don't interfere. Don't countermand my instructions. Don't create complications. And then she thought of 300 families depending on a system that was slowly deteriorating because one proud man refused to admit he couldn't do everything alone. Show me the books, Eliza said. Mrs. Brennan's eyebrows rose slightly. My lady, the household accounts, the tenant records, the neglected repairs, the delayed decisions, all of it. Eliza turned to face her. If I'm going to be trapped in this gilded cage, I might as well make myself useful. For the first time, Mrs. Brennan smiled. It transformed her face entirely. Yes, my lady, right away. The library became Eliza's war room. It was a beautiful space, 3 stories of books, leather chairs, rolling ladders, and windows that flooded the room with light. It was also, Mrs. Brennan informed her, almost never used. Rowan preferred his private study for business matters. Perfect. Within 3 days, Eliza had commandeered a large table near the south windows and covered it with ledgers, correspondence, and maps of the estate. Mrs. Brennan proved invaluable, answering questions with the precision of someone who'd been waiting years for someone to actually ask them. The medical supplies, Eliza said, tracing a finger down a column of expenses. Dr. Matthews has been requesting an increase for 18 months. Yes, my lady, His Grace approved a modest increase last year, but it's insufficient. We've had 2 difficult births this winter, and the doctor had to purchase supplies from his own funds. Eliza made a note. That's unacceptable. What's the actual requirement? Mrs. Brennan showed her the doctor's itemized request. It was reasonable, thoroughly justified, and had apparently been ignored because it required more than a cursory glance to evaluate. Approve it, Eliza said, and reimburse Dr. Matthews for his personal expenses. His Grace would need to— His Grace told me not to create complications, Eliza interrupted. Letting the estate doctor run out of supplies and go into debt seems rather complicated, doesn't it? Mrs. Brennan's lips twitched. Indeed, my lady. Then I'm simplifying things. Next item. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Eliza approved the schooling arrangements, authorized the roof repairs, reorganized the charity drive to be more efficient, and discovered that the quarterly tenant reviews hadn't been conducted in over a year. How is that even possible? Eliza demanded. These are people's livelihoods. His Grace sends his land manager to assess the farms, Mrs. Brennan explained. But the personal reviews, the ones where families can raise concerns or request adjustments, those require the Duke or Duchess to be present. And Rowan hasn't done them. He finds them tedious. Eliza felt anger flare hot and bright in her chest. Tedious. These people's lives were tedious. Schedule them, she said, starting next week. Every family. I'll conduct them myself. My lady, that's over 300— I can count, Mrs. Brennan. Eliza stood, suddenly needing to move. These people depend on us. The least we can do is look them in the eye once every few months. His Grace may object. His Grace, Eliza said, doesn't seem to be paying much attention to what I'm doing, unless you've reported back to him. Mrs. Brennan drew herself up. I serve the household, my lady, not as a spy. Good. Eliza softened her tone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply— No offense taken. Mrs. Brennan gathered some papers. Though I should mention that His Grace does review the household accounts monthly. He'll see these expenditures. Let him. Eliza returned to the table. They're justified, properly documented, and fall within my duties as Duchess. If he has objections, he can bring them to me directly. She could feel Mrs. Brennan's approval, even though the woman said nothing. Will there be anything else, my lady? Yes. Eliza looked up. I want to see the estate. All of it. The farms, the tenant houses, the village. Not from a carriage window. Actually see it. I'll arrange it with the groundskeeper. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. And Eliza hesitated. Thank you for trusting me with this. The housekeeper's expression softened. You remind me of the late Duchess, my lady. She also believed that duty meant more than just showing up. After she left, Eliza sat alone in the library, surrounded by years of neglect and disorganization. It should have been overwhelming. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before the wedding. Purpose. Rowan had locked her in a cage, but he'd given her the keys to the estate, whether he realized it or not. And Eliza was beginning to understand that there were many kinds of power, and not all of them came from a title or a bank account. She didn't see Rowan for a week. He kept his word about the schedule. His secretary, a nervous young man named Thomas, delivered a note every few days informing her that His Grace requests your company on a particular evening at a particular time. The language was clinical, the encounters even more so. Eliza endured them with the same detachment she might have shown to a medical procedure. Necessary, unpleasant, brief. Afterward, Rowan would return to his chambers without a word, and Eliza would lie in the darkness, feeling nothing and wondering if this would be her entire life. But the days were different. The days belonged to her. She threw herself into the estate work with an intensity that surprised even Mrs. Brennan. Up at dawn, working through correspondence and accounts until midday, then out with the groundskeeper, a gruff older man named William, who clearly hadn't expected the new Duchess to actually want to walk through mud and inspect irrigation systems. The drainage here is poor, Eliza observed, standing in a field where water pooled in uneven patches. How long has it been like this? William shifted his weight, uncomfortable. 3 seasons, Your Grace. I mentioned it to His Grace, but there were more important priorities, Eliza finished. She'd heard variations of that phrase a dozen times already. What would it take to fix it? French drains along the low edge, maybe some grading, a week's work with the right crew. He paused. If it's not done before spring planting, we'll lose a quarter of the yield from this section. Eliza pulled out the small notebook she'd started carrying. Consider it approved. Get me the cost estimate by Friday. William stared at her. You can authorize that? I'm the Duchess, Eliza said, meeting his eyes. And His Grace is too busy with important matters to concern himself with drainage systems. So yes, I can authorize it. She could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing the risk of following her orders versus the cost of waiting for permission that might never come. Yes, Your Grace, he said finally. I'll have the estimate ready. It became a pattern. Eliza would identify a problem, neglected repairs, inefficient systems, delayed decisions, and solve it. She worked within the household budget that Rowan largely ignored, staying carefully within the allocated funds. She documented everything meticulously, knowing that eventually he would notice. She wanted him to notice. The tenants were harder to win over than the staff. Her first quarterly review was with a farming family named the Harpers, husband, wife, and 3 children living in a stone cottage that needed a new roof. They sat across from her in the manor's small receiving room, clearly uncomfortable with the formality. Your Grace, Thomas Harper began, twisting his cap in his hands. We don't want to seem ungrateful, but the roof is leaking, Eliza said. In the children's bedroom, if I'm reading the maintenance report correctly. The wife, Margaret, blinked in surprise. You know about that? I've been reviewing all the outstanding maintenance requests. Apparently it's been on the list for 2 years. Eliza pulled out her notes. Along with a cracked foundation stone and a problem with the well pump. Thomas and Margaret exchanged glances. The previous land manager said there wasn't budget, Thomas said carefully. The previous land manager, Eliza replied, was making excuses. The budget exists. The repairs will begin next week. She made a note. Is there anything else? Problems with the farm equipment? Issues with the soil? Concerns about the children? The school, Margaret said suddenly. The youngest needs to start this year, but the schoolmaster said there isn't room. Eliza had heard about this. The village school was overcrowded, operating with 1 teacher for 40 children. I'm working on that, she said. We're bringing in a 2nd teacher. Should be resolved within the month. The Harpers stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. Your Grace, Thomas said slowly, we didn't expect, that is, we heard you were just a decorative addition to the household? Eliza smiled without humor. Yes, I imagine that's what everyone heard. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Don't apologize for honesty, Mr. Harper. It's a rare commodity. Eliza closed her notebook. I can't promise I'll solve every problem immediately, but I can promise I'll listen. And I'll try. When they left, Eliza saw Margaret squeeze her husband's hand and whisper something that made him smile. It was a small victory, but it was a victory. Marseille. 3 weeks into her tenure as Duchess, Eliza received an unexpected visitor. She was in the library reviewing agricultural reports when Mrs. Brennan appeared looking unusually flustered. My lady, Lord Philip Ashford is here to see you. Philip, Rowan's cousin. Eliza had met him briefly at the wedding. Charming, handsome in a softer way than Rowan, with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Show him in. Philip entered like he owned the room, which, given that he was technically in line to inherit if Rowan died without an heir, he might someday. He was dressed impeccably, his blonde hair artfully styled, his manner friendly and completely insincere. Lady Ashford, he said, bowing with a flourish. How lovely to see you again. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Eliza didn't stand. To what do I owe the pleasure? Can't a cousin visit his new family member? Philip settled into a chair without being invited. I wanted to see how you were settling in. Rowan can be challenging to live with. Can he? Oh, don't be polite on my account. Philip's smile widened. We both know this isn't a love match. The whole county knows it. My cousin needed an heir, your family needed financial relief. It's all very practical. Eliza felt her spine stiffen. Your point? No point. Just solidarity. He gestured at the papers scattered across her table. Though I see you're keeping yourself busy. Household accounts, estate management. How industrious. There was something in his tone that set off warning bells. Someone has to manage it, Eliza said carefully. Indeed. Though I'm surprised Rowan is allowing you so much latitude. He's usually quite controlling about estate matters. Philip's eyes were sharp, assessing. He does know what you're doing, doesn't he? I'm performing my duties as Duchess. Of course, of course. Philip stood, wandering over to examine the maps on the wall. It's just that Rowan can be particular about changes, even necessary ones, and some might say that a duchess who's only been here a few weeks making significant decisions about tenant housing, medical supplies, staffing, well, it could be seen as overstepping. By some, Eliza said, but not by the people actually affected by those decisions. The tenants love you already, Philip said. I've heard. The benevolent new duchess, actually caring about their problems. It's quite the contrast to Rowan's distance. Is that a problem? Not for me. Philip turned to face her, and for a moment his mask slipped. Beneath the charm was something harder, more calculating. But power shifts make people nervous, Lady Ashford, and you're shifting quite a bit of it, whether you realize it or not. I'm managing a household. That's hardly a coup. No, Philip agreed, but it's a foundation. And foundations can support many things. The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise combined. I should go, Philip said, the charm sliding back into place like a mask. But do keep up the excellent work. The estate needs someone who cares. And if you ever need an ally... He let the sentence trail off meaningfully. After he left, Eliza sat very still, her mind racing. Philip wasn't offering friendship. He was probing for weakness, testing whether she might be useful to him somehow. And his comments about power shifts, about Rowan's reaction. For the first time, it occurred to Eliza that her actions might have consequences beyond improving estate management. She thought about stopping, playing it safe, staying invisible. And then she thought about Margaret Harper's cracked foundation, and the school that needed a second teacher, and the drainage system that would cost a quarter of the harvest if it wasn't fixed. Rowan had told her not to create complications. Too late for that. The confrontation came on a Tuesday. Eliza was having breakfast in her rooms when Rowan appeared in the doorway without knocking, holding a leather portfolio. We need to talk, he said. Eliza set down her teacup. Good morning to you too. The household accounts. He dropped the portfolio on the table. I've been reviewing them, as is your right. You've authorized over £3,000 in expenditures. All necessary, all documented, all within the household budget. Eliza kept her voice level. Would you like me to explain the breakdown? I'd like you to explain why you thought you could make these decisions without consulting me. There it was, the anger she'd been expecting for weeks. His face was composed, but his eyes were cold fire. Because you told me not to create complications, Eliza said, and allowing the estate doctor to run out of supplies, or the tenant housing to deteriorate, or the school to remain overcrowded seemed rather complicated. Those are my decisions to make. No, Eliza said quietly. They're the Duchess's decisions to make. You said so yourself. I have duties. I'm performing them. Rowan's jaw tightened. I didn't mean… What? That I should actually do anything? That I should have opinions and make choices? Eliza stood, facing him across the table. You locked me in a cage and called it marriage. Fine. But you don't get to complain when I arrange the furniture. This isn't about furniture. This is about you undermining my authority. Your authority? Eliza felt something snap inside her, all the careful control she'd maintained for weeks suddenly insufficient to contain her rage. You abandoned your authority. You let this estate deteriorate for 5 years because you were too proud to admit you needed help, too stubborn to delegate, too… Careful, Rowan said, his voice dangerously soft. Or what? You'll freeze me out more than you already have? Lock me in a different room? Send me away? Eliza laughed, and it sounded broken even to her own ears. You've already done everything to me except see me as a person, so forgive me if I stopped waiting for your permission to exist. The silence that followed was absolute. Rowan stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. Surprise, anger, and beneath it all, something that might have been recognition. The repairs are necessary, he said finally. His voice had lost its sharp edge. But you should have consulted me. Would you have listened? I would have… He stopped. I don't know. The honesty of it shocked them both. The tenants trust you, Rowan continued more quietly. Mrs. Brennan says you've won over the entire staff. Even William is singing your praises, and he barely tolerates me. He picked up the portfolio. You're good at this. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. Thank you, Eliza said. Don't let it go to your head. The ice was creeping back into his voice, protective armor reasserting itself. And next time, inform me before you authorize major expenditures. Is that an order or a request? Rowan's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Both. He left without another word, closing the door behind him with surprising gentleness. Eliza sat back down, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline crash. She'd won. Not completely, not decisively, but she'd stood her ground and he'd backed down. It was something. The next morning, she found a note slipped under her door. Rowan's handwriting, precise and controlled. The drainage system repairs. Proceed as planned. Well done. Our Eliza read it 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in her desk drawer. It was the first piece of kindness he'd shown her. And despite everything, despite the anger and the hurt and the cold transaction of their marriage, she found herself hoping it wouldn't be the last. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth. The estate transformed, bare trees budding green, flowers pushing through the soil, lambs wobbling in the fields. Eliza found herself rising earlier, walking the grounds before breakfast, watching the world wake up. She'd been Duchess for 2 months. It felt like longer. The tenant reviews had become her favorite part of the week. She'd worked through over half the families now, learning names and problems and hopes. Thomas Harper's roof was fixed. Margaret had baked her bread as thanks, presented shyly in a basket lined with cloth. Eliza had eaten it alone in her room and cried for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. The estate was thriving under her attention. Even Rowan had to admit it, though he did so grudgingly, in brief comments dropped during the rare dinners they shared. The spring charity drive was well organized. The new teacher is working out well. The tenants seem content. They weren't warm conversations. But they were conversations. Progress. Eliza had stopped expecting more. She'd built a life here. Not the one she'd imagined, but one that had meaning nonetheless. The manor, the estate, the people who depended on it, they needed her. She mattered. It was enough. It had to be. Then came the dinner party. Rowan had informed her with his typical lack of ceremony. "We're hosting the county families next Saturday. You'll need to act as hostess." It would be her first major social event as Duchess. Mrs. Brennan helped her prepare the proper dress, the seating arrangements, the subtle politics of who ranked where and why. Eliza absorbed it all, determined not to embarrass herself. The guests arrived in carriages, dressed in their finest, armed with curiosity and judgment. Eliza greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and played her part perfectly. Gracious, attentive, forgettable. Rowan barely looked at her all evening, but then he barely looked at anyone. He moved through the social requirements with the same efficiency he brought to business negotiations. Cold, competent, and utterly devoid of warmth. Philip was there, of course, charming everyone, especially the young ladies, throwing barbs at Rowan disguised as jokes. "My cousin works too hard," he announced to the table during the main course. "Someone needs to remind him that life is for living, not just enduring." Polite laughter. Rowan's expression didn't change. "Perhaps that's what marriage is for," Lady Hartwell suggested, smiling at Eliza. "To soften the rough edges." "If anyone could manage it," Philip said, raising his glass, "it would be our lovely new Duchess. She's already worked miracles with the estate." More laughter. But there was an edge to it now, a sharpness that made Eliza's instincts prickle. "Hardly miracles," she said lightly, "just attention to neglected details." "Neglected by whom, I wonder?" Philip's smile was poisonous sweet. The table went quiet. "Philip," Rowan said. His voice was soft, but it carried a warning. "What?" "I'm complimenting your wife. She's accomplished more in 2 months than—" "Enough!" The single word cut through the room like a blade. Philip subsided, still smiling, but his eyes were cold. The dinner continued, but something had shifted. Eliza could feel it in the glances, the whispers, the calculations happening behind polite facades. After the guests departed, Rowan found her in the library where she'd retreated. "I apologize for my cousin," he said without preamble. "It's fine." "It's not." He stood awkwardly near the door as if unsure whether to enter. "Philip enjoys causing trouble. Always has." "He wasn't wrong, though," Eliza said quietly. "I have accomplished more than you did in 5 years." She expected anger. Instead, Rowan surprised her. "I know," he said. Eliza looked up sharply. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Complex, layered, almost vulnerable. "I've been—" He stopped, searching for words. "Unfair to you." The admission hung in the air between them. "Yes," Eliza said. "You have been. I had my reasons." "I'm sure you did." She closed the ledger she'd been pretending to read. "But reasons aren't the same as justification, Rowan. You treated me like property, like a problem to be managed." "I know," he said again. The silence stretched. Outside, night had fallen completely. The library was lit only by the fire and a few lamps, casting long shadows. "You've proven yourself," Rowan said finally. "To the staff, to the tenants, to the county families. You're—" He hesitated. "You're exceptional at this. Better than I ever was." It should have felt like victory. Instead, Eliza just felt tired. "Is that why you're here? To tell me I've passed some test I didn't know I was taking?" "No." He moved further into the room. "I'm here because I realized something tonight, watching you navigate that dinner with more grace than I've shown in years. I realized that I married you for all the wrong reasons, but somewhere along the way, you became exactly the person this estate needed." "Just not the person you needed," Eliza said softly. Rowan's expression fractured. "I don't know what I need." The honesty of it pierced through Eliza's defenses. For a moment, he looked almost lost. This powerful, controlled man, adrift in his own carefully constructed isolation. "Neither do I," she admitted. They stood there, two people bound by law and contract and mutual loneliness, not knowing how to bridge the distance between them. "Thank you," Rowan said finally, "for everything you've done, for being better than I deserved." Then he left, and Eliza sat alone in the library, watching the fire die down to embers, wondering if that almost apology would be enough to build something from. Wondering if she even wanted to try. The next weeks unfolded with a peculiar rhythm, distant but not quite hostile, functional but not quite warm. Rowan stopped avoiding her completely. They took meals together occasionally, discussed estate matters with something approaching civility, even shared a few conversations that didn't end in silence or retreat. Progress. Of a sort. Eliza told herself it was enough. Some marriages had less. At least they weren't actively at war anymore. But late at night, alone in her vast bedroom, she couldn't help wondering what it would feel like if he actually looked at her like she mattered. Not as the Duchess, not as the estate manager he'd accidentally acquired, but as Eliza. She was thinking about exactly that when Mrs. Brennan knocked on the library door one Thursday afternoon, her expression unusually tight. "My lady, we have a situation." Eliza looked up from the crop rotation schedules she'd been reviewing. "What kind of situation?" "The Miller family. Their son Jacob. He's been injured. Badly." Eliza was on her feet before Mrs. Brennan finished speaking. "How badly?" "Farming accident. His leg is crushed. Dr. Matthews is with him now, but..." The housekeeper's pause said everything. "The doctor says he needs a surgeon, a specialist from the city, but the cost..." "How much?" £50, my lady, plus travel expenses. The Millers don't have it." £50. A fortune to a tenant family. A rounding error in the estate's accounts. "Send for the surgeon," Eliza said immediately. "The estate will cover it." Mrs. Brennan hesitated. "His Grace would need to approve an expenditure that large." "Then I'll tell him myself." Eliza grabbed her shawl. "Where are the Millers?" "West Tenant Housing, Cottage 12. But my lady, perhaps you shouldn't..." "Shouldn't what? Care that a child might lose his leg because we're worried about protocol?" Eliza was already heading for the door. "Get the surgeon. I'll handle Rowan." The Miller cottage was small and desperately neat, the kind of home where poverty was kept at bay through sheer force of will and scrubbing. Inside, the air smelled of blood and fear. Jacob Miller was 16, pale as death, his leg wrapped in makeshift bandages already soaked through. His mother knelt beside the bed, gripping his hand. His father stood by the window, face carved from stone, pretending not to cry. Dr. Matthews looked up when Eliza entered, relief flashing across his tired features. "Your Grace, thank the..." He caught himself. "I'm glad you're here." "How is he?" "Crushed below the knee. The bone is shattered." Dr. Matthews kept his voice low, but not low enough that the family couldn't hear. "I can amputate here, or we can try to save it with a specialist. But that requires..." "A surgeon from the city. I know. I've already authorized it." The doctor blinked. "Your Grace, the cost is irrelevant." Eliza moved to the bedside, looking down at Jacob's white face. He was trying to be brave, but his eyes were glazed with pain. "Jacob, listen to me. We're getting you the best surgeon in the county. You're going to keep your leg. Do you understand?" "Your Grace," his mother whispered, "we can't possibly." "You're not paying for it. The estate is." Eliza looked at Mr. Miller. "Your son was injured working estate land. That makes him our responsibility." "It was my own fault," Jacob managed through gritted teeth. "The equipment was fine. I just..." "Was doing your job," Eliza finished, "which makes it our responsibility regardless." She turned to Dr. Matthews. "How quickly can the surgeon get here?" "If I send word immediately. Tomorrow evening at the earliest." "Send word, whatever it costs." After she left the cottage, Eliza stood outside in the cool air, trying to settle her racing heart. Inside, she could hear Mrs. Miller crying, not from grief now, but relief. She'd just committed £50 of estate money without permission. Rowan was going to be furious. She didn't care. The confrontation came sooner than expected. She'd barely made it back to the manor when Thomas found her. "My lady, His Grace requests your presence in his study, immediately." Mrs. Brennan had wasted no time reporting. Eliza couldn't even blame her. The woman had a duty to inform Rowan of major financial decisions. She found him standing behind his desk, jaw tight, holding what looked like Dr. Matthews' request form. £50, he said without preamble. For one tenant. For a child who's going to lose his leg otherwise. We employ a doctor specifically to handle these situations. Dr. Matthews can amputate. He can't repair a shattered bone. We need a specialist. Eliza held his gaze. Which you would know if you'd bothered to visit the family yourself. Rowan's expression went cold. I don't have time to personally inspect every injury on the estate. Then it's fortunate I do. This isn't a small repair, Eliza. This is a significant sum. This is a child's future. The words came out sharper than she intended. Jacob Miller is 16 years old. If he loses that leg, he can't work the farm. His family loses their livelihood. They'll end up destitute, and we'll have to support them anyway. So yes, £50 now is expensive, but it's cheaper than a lifetime of charity, and it's the right thing to do. The right thing, Rowan repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. And you're the arbiter of that now? Someone has to be, since you've abdicated the responsibility. The words hung between them like a thrown gauntlet. You're overstepping, Rowan said, dramatically. I'm doing my job, the one you gave me when you decided household management was beneath your attention. Eliza moved closer to the desk. You can't have it both ways, Rowan. Either I'm the Duchess with authority over these matters, or I'm just decorative furniture. Which is it? His hands flattened on the desk, knuckles white. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, the surgeon is already en route, I assume? Yes? And if I countermand the order? Then I'll pay for it myself. Eliza lifted her chin. I still have the settlement you provided. £50 won't bankrupt me. Something shifted in Rowan's expression, surprise or possibly respect. That won't be necessary, he said finally. The estate will cover it. Eliza exhaled carefully. Thank you. Don't thank me, you were right. It's cheaper than long-term support. He sat down, suddenly looking exhausted. But Eliza, you need to understand, setting this precedent, paying for specialist care for injured tenants, every family on the estate will expect the same treatment now. Good, Eliza said. They should. We can't afford... Yes, we can. I've reviewed the accounts, Rowan, extensively. We have the money. We've always had the money. You just don't want to spend it on people you consider beneath your notice. His head snapped up, anger flaring. That's not... Isn't it? Eliza's voice was quiet now, but no less fierce. You rebuilt the East Wing ballroom last year, £20,000 for a room you use twice a year, but £50 for a tenant's child is too much? The ballroom is an investment in the estate's social standing, and Jacob Miller is an investment in the estate's soul. She leaned against the desk. These people work themselves to exhaustion for you, Rowan. They break their bodies on your land. The least we can do is fix them when they break. The silence was different this time, heavier. You sound like my mother, Rowan said finally. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. He rubbed his face. She used to say the same thing, that the estate was only as strong as the people who worked it, that we had a responsibility beyond profit. She was right. Yes. Rowan looked at her properly for the first time since she'd entered. She would have liked you, I think. The words were so unexpected, so unguarded, that Eliza didn't know how to respond. I should go, she said instead. I want to check on Jacob before the surgeon arrives. Eliza, Rowan's voice stopped her at the door. What you're doing, building relationships with the tenants, earning their loyalty, it's changing things. You understand that, don't you? Changing them how? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. They used to fear me. Now they love you. That's a shift in power. Is that a problem? I don't know yet. His eyes were unreadable. But Philip thinks it is. Philip isn't in charge of this estate. No, Rowan agreed, but he's family, and he has ambitions. The warning settled over Eliza like a cold blanket. She thought of Philip's visit weeks ago, his probing questions, his talk of power shifts and foundations. I'm not trying to undermine you, she said. I know, but intention and perception aren't always the same thing. Rowan stood. Just be careful. Not everyone is happy to see you succeed. After she left, Eliza walked slowly back through the manor, her mind churning. She'd been so focused on helping people, on building something meaningful, that she hadn't considered the larger implications. She was accumulating power. Not deliberately, but inevitably. Every decision she made, every tenant she helped, every improvement she authorized, it all added up to influence, real influence, and influence threatened people. The surgeon arrived the next evening, an efficient man named Dr. Carlyle, who examined Jacob with brisk competence and announced the leg could be saved with proper surgery. The operation took 3 hours. Eliza waited in the cottage with the Millers, watching Mrs. Miller pray and Mr. Miller Pace and Jacob's younger siblings huddled together in terrified silence. When Dr. Carlyle finally emerged, exhausted but satisfied, the collective relief was palpable. "He'll keep the leg," the surgeon announced. "Full recovery will take months, and he'll likely have a limp. But he'll walk. He'll work." Mrs. Miller sobbed. Mr. Miller gripped Eliza's hand so hard it hurt. "Thank you, Your Grace," he said, voice breaking. "Thank you." News of Jacob Miller's surgery spread through the tenant community like wildfire. Within days, Eliza couldn't walk through the estate without being stopped by families wanting to express gratitude. Some brought gifts, eggs, bread, flowers. Others just wanted to shake her hand. "You saved that boy," an older farmer told her. "The Duke never would have done that." Eliza tried to deflect. "His Grace approved the expense after you pushed him too." The farmer's eyes were knowing. "We know how it works, Your Grace. You're the one who cares." It should have felt good. It did feel good, but it also felt dangerous. She was walking back from the village market the following week when she encountered Philip on horseback, looking like he'd stepped from a painting, perfectly tailored riding clothes, expensive horse, sunlight catching his golden hair. "Lady Ashford," he said, reining in beside her, "out among your subjects?" "The tenants aren't subjects, Philip." "Aren't they?" He dismounted with easy grace. "They certainly treat you like royalty. I've heard the stories. The benevolent Duchess, saving children, fixing homes, caring about the little people. Is there a point to this conversation?" "Just an observation." He walked alongside her, leading his horse. "You're building quite a following. The people adore you. The staff worships you. Even old William speaks of you with reverence, and I've never heard him speak well of anyone." "I'm doing my job." "Oh, you're doing far more than that." Philip's tone was light, conversational, but there was steel underneath. "You're creating loyalty. Personal loyalty, the kind that could be useful." Eliza stopped walking. "What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing nefarious, cousin." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm simply acknowledging reality. You have influence now, real influence. The question is what you plan to do with it. Manage the estate, help people, that's all. Is it?" Philip studied her. "Because from where I'm standing, you're in an interesting position. Married to a duke who treats you like a business transaction, building power independent of his authority, one might wonder if you have other ambitions." The implication was clear and outrageous. "If you're suggesting I'm plotting against Rowan, I'm not suggesting anything." Philip remounted his horse. "I'm just pointing out possibilities. After all, you're young, intelligent, and increasingly powerful in your own right. And Rowan is, well, Rowan, cold, distant, not exactly husband material. Get to the point. The point, dear cousin, is that alliances matter. And I want you to know that if you ever find yourself in need of an ally, someone who appreciates your talents, who could help you achieve more than simple household management, I'm available. I'm not interested in whatever scheme you're running. No scheme, just an offer." He tipped his hat. "Think about it. You're wasting your potential playing house manager. You could be so much more." He rode off before Eliza could respond, leaving her standing in the road, anger and unease warring in her chest. Philip wasn't offering alliance. He was testing her loyalty, trying to determine if she could be turned against Rowan, used as a weapon in whatever power play he was orchestrating. The realization crystallized something for Eliza. She'd been thinking of her work on the estate as separate from her marriage, parallel tracks that never quite intersected. But they weren't separate. Everything she built, every loyalty she earned, it all affected the complex balance of power in the Ashford family. And Philip saw her as either an asset or a threat. She needed to talk to Rowan. She found him in his study that evening, working through correspondence by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. "Eliza, is something wrong?" "Philip approached me today." Rowan's expression went very still. "What did he say?" She told him everything, the implications, the offer of alliance, the suggestion that she could be more than just a household manager. When she finished, Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "He's testing you," he said finally, "trying to determine if you're an opening he can exploit." "That's what I thought." Eliza sat down across from him. "What's his endgame?" "The title, the estate, everything." Rowan set down his pen. "Philip is next in line if I die without an heir. He's been waiting for that inheritance his entire life. And now you're here, which means that inheritance might never come. So he wants to what? Turn me against you? Create division? Possibly. Or simply gather information, understand the dynamics so he can exploit them later. Rowan's jaw tightened. I should have warned you more directly. Philip is charming and dangerous in equal measure. I'm not interested in his schemes. I know, but he won't stop trying. Rowan looked at her directly. You need to be careful, Eliza. You've built something remarkable here. The tenant's loyalty, the staff's devotion. It's impressive, but it also makes you valuable to people like Philip, people who might try to use you. No one's using me, Eliza said firmly. Good. Something in Rowan's expression softened. For what it's worth, I'm glad you told me. We may not have a conventional marriage, but I'd rather we trust each other than not. It was the closest he'd come to expressing something like partnership. So would I, Eliza said. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the firelight casting warm shadows across the study. Jacob Miller is recovering well, Eliza said eventually. Dr. Carlisle says he should be able to walk again within 3 months. I heard. The entire county has heard. Rowan's lips quirked. You're becoming famous for your charitable works. I'm not doing it for fame. I know, that's what makes it effective. He paused. My mother used to say that real power comes from service, not dominance, that the person who serves best leads longest. Wise woman. She was. Rowan's voice carried old grief. She would have handled the tenants much better than I have. She understood people in a way I never learned. It's not too late to learn. He looked at her with something like surprise. You think I should be more involved? I think the estate needs both of us, Eliza said carefully. You have the business knowledge, the strategic thinking. I have the interpersonal skills, the community relationships. Together, we could actually make this place thrive instead of just survive. Partnership, Rowan said slowly, testing the word. Of a sort. In estate management. For now, Eliza agreed. The unspoken hung between them, the possibility that partnership in one area might eventually extend to others, but neither of them was ready to name it yet. I'll consider it, Rowan said finally. The joint management approach. It's not a terrible idea. Coming from him, it was practically a ringing endorsement. Eliza stood to leave, then hesitated. Rowan? Thank you for trusting me enough to listen. Thank you for being trustworthy, he replied. It was a small moment, but walking back to her rooms, Eliza felt something shift, a door opening, just a crack, in the wall between them. Maybe there was hope for this broken marriage after all. The next morning brought a letter that shattered that fragile optimism. Eliza was having breakfast when Mrs. Brennan delivered it, her expression grave. The envelope was expensive paper, sealed with the Ashford family crest. It's from Philip's mother, Mrs. Brennan said. Lady Catherine Ashford. Eliza opened it with growing dread. The letter was brief and brutally polite. Lady Ashford, it has come to my attention that you have taken an unusually active role in estate management. While I'm certain your intentions are admirable, I feel obligated to remind you that the Ashford estate has particular traditions and expectations. As a new member of our family, you may not yet fully understand the delicate balance required in such matters. I would be pleased to call upon you this Thursday to discuss your duties and how best to support my nephew in his responsibilities as Duke. Yours in family solidarity, Lady Catherine Ashford. The words were honeyed poison. Every sentence a veiled criticism, every offer of help a thinly disguised threat. She's Philip's mother, Eliza said aloud. Of course she is. And the Dowager Marchioness of Huntley, Mrs. Brennan added. Very influential in county society. Very traditional in her views. Translation, very opposed to an upstart new duchess making changes. Thursday is 2 days away, Eliza said. Yes, my lady. And refusing to receive her would be social suicide, Mrs. Brennan confirmed. Eliza set down the letter, her mind racing. This was Philip's next move. Send his formidable mother to put the presumptuous new duchess in her place. Undermine her confidence, maybe scare her into backing off. It might have worked a few months ago. Mrs. Brennan, Eliza said slowly, I need you to help me prepare, and I need complete honesty. What exactly am I up against? The housekeeper's expression was grim. Lady Catherine is one of the most powerful women in the county. She's been trying to influence Ashford estate affairs for years, ever since the late Duchess died. His Grace has kept her at arm's length, but she's persistent, and she doesn't like change. Especially change that doesn't come from her. Precisely. Then we'll need to show her that the changes I've made are working. Prepare a full report on everything we've accomplished. The repairs, the tenant improvements, the financial efficiency. I want numbers, documentation, proof. You're going to fight her with facts? I'm going to fight her with results, Eliza corrected. She can disapprove of me all she wants, but she can't argue with a thriving estate. Mrs. Brennan's smile was sharp. The late Duchess would have loved you, my lady. Let's hope she's not the only one. That evening, Eliza worked late into the night, preparing for battle. Because that's what this was. A battle for legitimacy, for authority, for the right to continue the work she'd started. She was so absorbed in the documents that she didn't hear Rowan enter until he spoke. Preparing for Catherine's visit? Eliza looked up, startled. How did you know? She sent me a copy of her letter, along with her own note expressing concern about my wife's inappropriate involvement in estate business. He moved closer, examining the spread of papers. What's all this? Evidence? I'm not walking into that meeting unarmed. Rowan picked up one of her summary sheets, scanning it. His eyebrows rose. This is comprehensive. I'm thorough. You've documented everything. Expenditures, improvements, tenant satisfaction metrics, efficiency gains. He set down the paper. Eliza, this is better than my own estate reports. That's because you focus on profit margins. I focus on people. Apparently to great effect. Rowan sat down across from her. Catherine is going to try to intimidate you. That's what she does. She'll use social pressure, family tradition, veiled threats about propriety. Don't let her. I wasn't planning to. Good. He paused. I could be there, during the meeting, as support. The offer surprised her. You'd do that? You're my wife, and despite our unconventional arrangement, I don't appreciate my aunt trying to undermine you. His expression hardened. Catherine has been attempting to control this estate through me for years. I won't let her do it through you either. Eliza felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Thank you, but I think I need to handle this myself. If you're there, she'll direct everything through you. She needs to understand that I have authority independent of your presence. Rowan studied her for a long moment. You're right, you do. He stood. But if you need reinforcement, I'm available. Just send word. After he left, Eliza sat surrounded by her carefully prepared documents, feeling the weight of what was coming. Lady Catherine Ashford wasn't just a difficult relative. She was a test of Eliza's resolve, her authority, her right to the position she'd carved out. And Eliza intended to pass. Thursday arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Lady Catherine's carriage pulled up precisely at 2 o'clock, because of course it did. Everything about the woman was precise. Eliza received her in the formal drawing room, dressed in her finest day dress, every inch the Duchess. Mrs. Brennan had helped her prepare the room perfectly. Tea service, fresh flowers, the subtle markers of status and taste. Lady Catherine swept in like a queen, tall and regal, dressed in deep purple silk that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. She was handsome rather than beautiful, with Philip's sharp features and calculating eyes. Lady Ashford, she said, offering her hand with the air of someone granting a tremendous favor. How delightful to finally meet properly. Lady Catherine, thank you for coming. Eliza's smile was polite, nothing more. Please sit. I've had tea prepared. They observed the social rituals, pouring tea, commenting on the weather, discussing mutual acquaintances that Eliza barely knew. It was a dance, and both of them knew it. Finally, Lady Catherine set down her cup and got to business. I'll be direct, my dear. I'm concerned about your activities on the estate. My duties as Duchess, you mean? If that's what you'd like to call them. The barb was delicate but sharp. I understand you've been making significant decisions regarding tenant management, household expenditures, and estate improvements, without, from what I understand, consulting my nephew on many of these matters. I consult with the Duke regularly, Eliza said calmly, and he's approved all major expenditures. After you've already committed to them, I hear. Strategic initiative, Eliza replied. Someone had to address 5 years of neglect. Lady Catherine's eyes narrowed. Neglect? My dear, Rowan has managed this estate brilliantly. The financial returns are excellent, yes, but financial returns aren't everything. Eliza pulled out her prepared documents. Would you like to see the data on tenant satisfaction, productivity improvements, staff retention rates? I'm not interested in... Then perhaps you'd like to hear about the medical crisis we averted last week, or the drainage system that would have cost us 20% of the spring harvest if it hadn't been repaired. Eliza kept her voice pleasant, but her eyes were steel. Or maybe you'd like to visit the tenants yourself and ask them how they feel about the new Duchess's involvement in their welfare. Lady Catherine stared at her, clearly unused to being contradicted. Young woman, she said, voice dropping to ice, you seem to have forgotten your place. On the contrary, Eliza replied, I know exactly what my place is. I'm the Duchess of Ashford, and my place is ensuring this estate thrives, not just financially, but as a community. You've been married to my nephew for barely 3 months, long enough to accomplish more than anyone has in 5 years. The words landed like a slap. Lady Catherine's face flushed. How dare you? How dare I what? Care about the people who depend on this estate? Make decisions that improve their lives? Do the job that everyone else was too busy or too proud to do? Eliza leaned forward. I understand that you don't approve of me, Lady Catherine. That's your right. But whether you approve or not, I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not going to stop doing my job to make you more comfortable. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Lady Catherine smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of cold fury and calculation. You've made a mistake, my dear, she said softly. A very serious mistake. You think you've built power here, but power without protection is just vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Lady Catherine stood, gathering her things with sharp, precise movements. You're isolated here, child. New, unconnected, playing at being Duchess while the real power players watch and wait. And when you inevitably stumble, there will be consequences. Then I suppose I'd better not stumble. Lady Catherine's smile widened, showing teeth. We'll see. After she left, Eliza sat alone in the drawing room, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. She'd won the battle, but she'd also made a powerful enemy, and Lady Catherine's parting words echoed in her mind. Power without protection is just vulnerability waiting to be exploited. The war, Eliza realized, was just beginning. The war, Eliza realized, was just beginning. She didn't tell Rowan about Lady Catherine's visit immediately, partly because she wanted to prove she could handle the fallout herself, partly because she wasn't sure what to make of that final threat. 2 days passed in tense normalcy, estate work, tenant visits, the usual rhythm she'd built. But underneath, she felt the pressure building like a storm about to break. It broke at the quarterly community assembly. The assembly was a tradition Eliza had resurrected from the late Duchess's time, a gathering where tenants, merchants, and estate workers could voice concerns directly to the Duke and Duchess. Rowan had initially resisted, calling it inefficient, but Eliza had worn him down with logic and persistence. The first assembly had been awkward but productive. This second one should have been routine, should have been. The village hall was packed, every bench filled, people standing along the walls. Eliza sat beside Rowan at the front table, Mrs. Brennan to her left with her meticulous notes. The air smelled of damp wool and wood smoke. Outside, rain hammered against the windows. The first hour proceeded normally. Farmers discussing crop rotation, merchants requesting permit extensions, a dispute about a boundary fence that Rowan settled with characteristic efficiency. Eliza handled the social concerns, school overcrowding, medical supply requests, a proposal for a community garden. Then Philip walked in. He wasn't alone. Behind him came Lady Catherine, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral, and 3 men Eliza didn't recognize, wealthy landowners from neighboring estates judging by their clothes. The room went quiet. Rowan's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders tensing. Philip, Aunt Catherine, this is unexpected. Is it? Philip's smile was all charm and malice. I thought families should take an interest in estate affairs, especially when those affairs are being conducted so publicly. You're welcome to observe, Rowan said, his tone clipped. But this is a tenant assembly, not a social gathering. Of course. Philip took a seat in the front row, Lady Catherine beside him, the three landowners flanking them like soldiers. Please continue. The assembly limped forward, but the atmosphere had changed. People glanced nervously at the newcomers. Questions became more tentative. Even Rowan seemed off balance. Finally, when they opened the floor for general concerns, Philip stood. I have a question, he announced, projecting his voice to fill the hall. For Lady Ashford, specifically. Eliza felt every eye in the room turn to her. She kept her expression neutral. Yes? I've been reviewing estate expenditures as a concerned family member, you understand, and I've noticed something curious. He pulled out a document, holding it up like evidence. Over the past 3 months, you've authorized nearly £5,000 in what you call community improvements. All necessary repairs and medical expenses, Eliza replied calmly, all documented and approved. Approved by whom? My cousin? Philip's smile widened. Or did you simply proceed on your own authority? The Duchess has full authority over household and community matters, Rowan interjected, his voice hard, as has been tradition for generations. But tradition also suggests consultation, doesn't it? Partnership? Philip turned to address the crowd. I'm merely asking if His Grace was aware that his wife was spending thousands of pounds on, what was it, drainage systems and surgeon fees for individual tenants? Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Eliza saw the calculation in it. Philip was trying to paint her as reckless, unauthorized, overstepping. Every expenditure was necessary, Eliza said, standing now, and every single one has improved productivity and tenant welfare. Would you like to see the data? Data, Philip laughed. My dear cousin, we're not running a charity. This is a business, and businesses require fiscal responsibility, not bleeding hearts throwing money at every sob story. Jacob Miller wasn't a sob story, someone called from the back. He was dying. Eliza recognized the voice. Thomas Harper, the farmer whose roof she'd repaired months ago. And the school overcrowding wasn't sentiment, Margaret Harper added, standing beside her husband. Our children needed education. More voices joined in, tenants standing, defending Eliza's decisions. The room was fracturing, sides forming. Lady Catherine chose that moment to stand. Please, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. Let's not descend into chaos. I think Lord Philip raises a valid concern. Lady Ashford is clearly passionate about her charitable work, but passion without wisdom can be dangerous. She turned to Eliza, her expression sympathetic in a way that felt like a knife wrapped in velvet. My dear, you're young, newly married, trying so hard to prove yourself, but you must understand managing an estate isn't about popularity. It's about sustainability, about making hard choices. She paused, letting the words settle. And sometimes, the hard choice is accepting that we cannot save everyone. I'm not trying to save everyone, Eliza said quietly. I'm trying to honor our obligations to the people who work this land. Noble words. But nobility doesn't balance budgets. Lady Catherine pulled out her own documents. How long had they been planning this? I've done some calculations. If we extrapolate your spending patterns over a full year, you'll have depleted the household reserves entirely. What happens then? When there's a real crisis and the money is gone because you've spent it all on individual kindnesses? The question landed hard. Eliza saw doubt creep into faces that had been supportive moments before. That's a dishonest projection, Rowan said, his voice cold. You're assuming consistent crisis-level spending, which Lady Ashford has demonstrated she's willing to authorize, Philip interrupted. £50 for one injured boy? That's admirable, cousin. But what about the next injury? And the one after that? Where does it end? It ends when we've created a sustainable system of care, Eliza shot back, which is what I've been trying to build. Not just emergency spending, but preventive maintenance, medical reserves, educational infrastructure. Expensive dreams, Lady Catherine said softly, for someone else's money. The words were poison. Eliza saw it work through the crowd, the reminder that she was an outsider, spending Ashford wealth without having earned it. This is inappropriate, Rowan stood, his face carved from ice. You're turning a tenant assembly into a personal attack. We're raising legitimate concerns about estate management, Philip countered. Or are we not allowed to question decisions anymore? Has my cousin's new wife become above accountability? The trap was perfect. If Rowan defended Eliza too strongly, it looked like he was shielding her from valid criticism. If he didn't defend her enough, it undermined her authority. Eliza made a choice. You want accountability? She moved around the table to face the assembly directly. Fine. Let's have it. Every expenditure I've made is documented, every decision justified. I've brought the ledgers. Anyone who wants to review them is welcome. She gestured to Mrs. Brennan, who produced the massive account books they'd prepared. But while we're discussing accountability, let's also discuss the 5 years before I arrived. 5 years of neglected repairs that cost us thousands in emergency fixes. 5 years of tenant concerns ignored until they became crises. 5 years of, how dare you? Lady Catherine's voice cracked like a whip. You presume to criticize the management of an estate you've been part of for mere months. I presume to state facts. Eliza held her ground. And the fact is, this estate was failing its people long before I got here. I'm trying to fix that. If that makes me reckless in your eyes, so be it. Reckless and arrogant, Philip added. A dangerous combination. The assembly had descended into barely controlled chaos. People arguing, voices raised. The careful structure of the meeting collapsed entirely. Then one of the landowners Lady Catherine had brought stood. He was older, distinguished, with the kind of face that suggested he'd never been told no in his life. I am Lord Westfield, he announced, and I must say I find this entire situation alarming. A young woman with no experience or family connection making unilateral decisions about a major estate? Spending thousands without oversight? It sets a troubling precedent. Lady Ashford is the Duchess, Rowan said, his voice dangerously quiet. Her authority is legitimate and legal. Legal, perhaps, but wise? Lord Westfield shook his head. Forgive me, Your Grace, but the county is watching, and what we're seeing is an estate in turmoil, led by someone who appears to prioritize sentiment over sense. It was calculated. A prominent landowner publicly questioning Eliza's competence. It would spread through the county like wildfire. The estate is thriving, Eliza said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Productivity is up. Tenant satisfaction is the highest it's been in years. And yes, we're spending money, but we're investing it in long-term stability, not just short-term profit. Pretty words, another of the landowners said, but words don't pay debts. We don't have debts, Rowan interjected. The estate is solvent. For now, Philip cut in. But my cousin raises an excellent point. What happens when the well runs dry? When Lady Ashford's generosity bankrupts the household? That won't happen, Eliza said. You can't know that, Lady Catherine replied. You're playing with resources you didn't earn, making promises you may not be able to keep. And when it all comes crashing down, it won't be you who suffers. It will be these people you claim to care about so deeply. The accusation was perfect in its cruelty. It twisted Eliza's compassion into recklessness, her care into potential harm. She opened her mouth to respond, but Rowan spoke first. This assembly is over. His voice carried absolute authority. Everyone out, now. Your Grace, Philip began. Out. Rowan's expression was carved from winter. All of you, except my wife. The room emptied slowly, people filing out with backward glances and whispered conversations. Lady Catherine left with a satisfied smile. Philip paused at the door, meeting Eliza's eyes with something like pity that made her want to scream. Finally, only Eliza, Rowan, and Mrs. Brennan remained. The silence was crushing. That was a disaster, Eliza said finally, her voice hollow. That was a coordinated attack, Rowan corrected. Philip and Catherine have been planning this for weeks. The landowners, the timing, the public venue, none of it was accidental. They made me look incompetent, reckless. They tried to. Rowan moved closer. But the tenants defended you. Did you notice that? When Philip attacked, they spoke up. A lot of good that does when the county landowners think I'm bankrupting the estate. The county landowners can... Rowan stopped himself, jaw tight. This isn't over. Philip won't stop at public humiliation. He's building a case. A case for what? Rowan exchanged a glance with Mrs. Brennan. The housekeeper's expression was grave. For challenging your position as Duchess, she said quietly. Eliza's stomach dropped. On what grounds? Incompetence? Unsuitability? Mismanagement of estate resources? Rowan ticked them off like a prosecutor. If he can convince enough influential people that you're damaging the estate, he can petition the family council to... Intervene. Intervene how? Strip you of authority. Potentially dissolve the marriage on grounds of fundamental incompatibility. Rowan's voice was flat, stating facts. It's rare, but it's possible, especially if he has support from other family members and prominent landowners. The room tilted. Eliza grabbed the edge of the table for balance. He's trying to annul our marriage. He's trying to eliminate the only thing standing between him and the inheritance, Rowan corrected. If you're gone, I'm back to being unmarried. And if I die without an heir, Philip gets everything. So what do we do? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. We prove them wrong. Document everything, every expenditure, every improvement, every positive outcome. Build an irrefutable case that your management has strengthened the estate, not weakened it. That's not enough, Mrs. Brennan said. Both of them looked at her. She met their eyes steadily. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but facts won't win this fight. Lord Philip and Lady Catherine aren't arguing logic. They're arguing perception. And right now, the perception they're creating is that Lady Ashford is an inexperienced outsider playing at being Duchess. Then we change the perception, Eliza said. How? Rowan demanded. Eliza thought fast, her mind racing through possibilities. They needed something dramatic, something that proved her value beyond question, something that couldn't be dismissed as sentiment or recklessness. The summer festival, she said suddenly. Rowan frowned. What about it? It's in 6 weeks. The biggest social event of the year. All the county families attend, along with merchants, tenant families, everyone. Eliza's thoughts crystallized. What if we used it to showcase everything we've accomplished? Not just talking about improvements, but showing them. Demonstrate that our investments have made the estate stronger, more productive, more profitable. A public display, Mrs. Brennan said slowly. Actual results they can see and touch. Exactly. Agricultural yields, community programs, financial returns, all of it on display. Make it impossible to claim we're bankrupting the estate when the evidence of our success is everywhere they look. Rowan considered this, his expression thoughtful. It's risky. If anything goes wrong, if the festival isn't perfect, then we'll have failed publicly, Eliza finished. I know. But right now we're losing the perception battle. We need to reclaim the narrative, and we need to do it dramatically. You're proposing we stake everything on a single event. I'm proposing we prove our worth in a way they can't ignore or twist. Eliza met his eyes. Unless you have a better idea? Rowan was silent. Then slowly he nodded. 6 weeks, he said. We have 6 weeks to prepare the most important festival this estate has ever hosted, and it needs to be flawless. It will be, Eliza promised. She tried to sound confident, but inside fear coiled cold and tight. Because Philip and Lady Catherine wouldn't just sit back and let them succeed. They'd be watching, waiting, looking for any opening to strike. And Eliza had just given them a deadline. The next morning brought a letter. Not from Lady Catherine this time, from someone Eliza had never heard of. Lady Margaret Weston, a distant Ashford relative, writing to express her deep concern about the estate's direction and offering to visit to provide guidance. The second letter arrived that afternoon. Lord Pembroke, a neighboring landowner, politely suggesting that perhaps the Duke needed more experienced counsel in household management. By evening, 5 more letters had come, all concerned, all offering help, all subtly undermining Eliza's authority. It's a campaign, Rowan said, reading through them in his study. They're mobilizing everyone they can to create the impression that you're overwhelmed and in need of rescue. Which makes me look incompetent even if I refuse their help. Exactly. He dropped the letters on his desk. Philip is good at this, building pressure from multiple directions until the target collapses. I'm not collapsing. I know you're not. Rowan looked at her properly. But Eliza, you need to understand what you're up against. These aren't just pompous relatives meddling. This is a coordinated effort to destroy your credibility, and it's only going to get worse. So we work harder, make the festival undeniable. And what if that's not enough? The question was quiet. What if no matter how successful we are, they find a way to twist it? Eliza didn't have an answer. That night, unable to sleep, she walked the manor halls. It was past midnight, the house silent except for the settling sounds of old wood and stone. She found herself in the portrait gallery, a long room lined with paintings of previous dukes and duchesses of Ashford. She stopped in front of Rowan's mother. The late duchess had been beautiful, painted in her prime, wearing a green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. But it was her expression that caught Eliza, strength tempered with kindness, authority that didn't need to announce itself. "I could use your advice," Eliza whispered to the painting. "How did you do it? How did you build power without making enemies? How did you—" She did make enemies. Eliza spun. Rowan stood in the doorway, still dressed, looking like he hadn't slept either. "Your mother?" He moved into the gallery, stopping beside her to look up at the portrait. Everyone said she was universally beloved, and she was, eventually. But in the beginning, when she first married my father, the family tried to break her. Said she was too common, too opinionated, too involved in estate matters that should be left to the Duke. What did she do? Ignored them, kept working, built her power base so thoroughly that by the time they realized what she'd done, it was too late to stop her. Rowan's expression was distant, remembering. She used to say that people who try to tear you down are just afraid of what you might build, and the best revenge is building it anyway. "Philip is afraid of me," Eliza said slowly, terrified, "because you're changing things, and change threatens his plans." Rowan looked at her. "He thought I'd marry someone decorative and useless, someone he could ignore or manipulate. Instead, I married you." The way he said it, not quite admiration, but something close, made Eliza's breath catch. "Was it luck," she asked, "that you married me instead of someone else?" Rowan's expression shuddered. "I didn't choose you for your capabilities. I chose you because your family needed money and mine needed an heir. That's all it was supposed to be. But it's become something else." "Has it?" The question was sharp, almost offensive. "We're still strangers, Eliza. We share a house, a title, responsibilities, but we don't—" He stopped. "Don't what?" "Don't know each other. Not really." He turned away from the portrait. "I don't know what you were like before this, what you dreamed about, what you wanted from life. All I know is what you've become here, competent, dedicated, frustratingly determined." "Frustratingly?" "You never give up, even when you should." His voice was rough. "Even when I treated you terribly, you just kept going. I don't understand it." Eliza took a breath. "Do you want to? Understand it?" The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. "I don't know if I should," Rowan said finally. "Getting closer to you would be, complicated." "We're already married. How much more complicated could it get?" "You'd be surprised." He met her eyes, and for a moment she saw past the walls, saw fear and longing and something that might have been hope, all tangled together. "I've spent 5 years keeping everyone at a distance. It's safer that way." "Safer for whom?" "For both of us." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The festival, we'll make it work. Whatever it takes. I'm not letting Philip destroy what you've built here." "What we've built," Eliza corrected. Rowan's smile was fleeting, fragile. "Maybe." After he left, Eliza stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by generations of Ashford ancestors. Somewhere in this lineage was the answer she needed, the blueprint for survival, for success, for turning enemies into irrelevance. She just had to find it in time. The next 6 weeks were chaos. Eliza threw herself into festival preparation with almost manic intensity. Every detail mattered. Every element had to be perfect. Mrs. Brennan became her co-conspirator, working 18-hour days coordinating vendors, scheduling demonstrations, managing logistics. They planned agricultural displays showing yield improvements, educational exhibitions featuring the new school programs, medical demonstrations with Dr. Matthews explaining the new health initiatives, financial charts proving that Eliza's reckless spending had actually increased estate profitability. But it wasn't enough to just organize. They needed allies. Eliza began a campaign of her own, visiting every influential family in the county. Not to defend herself, that would look desperate. Instead, she invited them to participate in the festival, offered them prominent roles, opportunities to showcase their own estates, platforms for their causes. "You're giving them ownership," Rowan observed after she'd secured commitments from 3 major landowners, "making them invested in the festival's success." "If it fails, they fail too," Eliza agreed, "so they'll work to make it succeed." "Clever? I learned from watching you negotiate business deals." His surprise was evident. "You were watching?" "I'm always watching." She met his eyes. How else do you think I learned to manage this estate so quickly? I studied you, how you think, how you strategize, how you turn obstacles into opportunities. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. They'd been working together more closely, sharing meals, discussing strategy late into the night. The walls between them were still there, but they were developing cracks. Small moments accumulated, Rowan bringing her tea when she worked too late, Eliza defending one of his business decisions to a critical tenant, the way he'd started asking her opinion before making estate decisions, the way she'd started trusting his judgment. It wasn't love, but it was something. 3 weeks before the festival, disaster struck. Eliza was reviewing vendor contracts when Mrs. Brennan rushed in, face pale. "My lady, there's been an accusation." "What kind of accusation?" "One of the tenant families, the Clarks, they're claiming you promised them money that never arrived, £20 for medical expenses." Eliza's stomach dropped. "I never promised them anything. I haven't even met with the Clarks." "I know, but they're telling everyone in the village, saying you made promises you couldn't keep, that you're all talk and no follow-through." Mrs. Brennan's hands twisted together. "It's spreading fast." "Who are the Clarks?" "Tenant family on the eastern edge, distant relatives of Philip's estate manager." Of course they were. "It's a plant," Eliza said. "Philip set this up." "Probably, but that doesn't matter if people believe it." Eliza was on her feet. "Where are the Clarks now?" "In the village, telling anyone who will listen. Then I'll go talk to them, publicly, in front of witnesses." "My lady, that could make it worse. Or it could end it." Eliza grabbed her cloak. "Either way, I'm not letting a lie spread unchallenged." She found the Clarks in the village square, surrounded by curious onlookers. They were a middle-aged couple, the husband looking uncomfortable, the wife defiant. "Mrs. Clark," Eliza called out, her voice carrying, "I understand you have a complaint against me." The crowd went silent. Mrs. Clark lifted her chin. "You promised us £20 for my husband's medical treatment. We've been waiting weeks, and nothing. You made us believe you cared, and it was all lies." "When did I make this promise?" 3 weeks ago. You came to our cottage. I've never been to your cottage." Eliza kept her voice level. "Mrs. Brennan keeps a schedule of all my visits. We can verify this easily." Mrs. Clark's confidence wavered. "You sent a messenger then, with your seal." "My seal is locked in my desk. I don't use messengers for financial promises. I handle them personally and document them." Eliza turned to address the watching crowd. "If anyone here has received a financial commitment from me, it's been face-to-face with paperwork and logged in the household records. I don't make secret promises." "She's lying." Mrs. Clark's desperation was showing now. "She's trying to make me look like a fool." "Someone is certainly making you look foolish," Eliza said quietly. "But it's not me. It's whoever told you to make this false accusation. Who was it, Mrs. Clark? Who put you up to this?" The woman's face crumpled. We needed the money. We were told if we said these things, we'd be compensated." "By whom?" Mr. Clark stepped forward, looking sick. "Lord Philip's man. He said you'd been making promises you couldn't keep to lots of families, and we should speak up before more people got hurt. He offered us £20 to tell our story." The crowd erupted. Eliza let the noise wash over her, feeling cold fury settle in her bones. Philip hadn't just attacked her credibility. He'd tried to buy false witnesses. "Thank you for your honesty," she said to the Clarks. "I appreciate that this must be difficult. For what it's worth, I understand desperation makes people do things they regret." "What will you do to us?" Mrs. Clark whispered. Eliza considered. Punishing them would make her look cruel, but letting it slide completely would make her look weak. "Nothing," she said finally, "but I hope you'll remember this the next time someone offers you money to tell lies. Because eventually, truth comes out, and then all you're left with is shame." She walked away, leaving the Clarks to face the judgment of their neighbors. That evening, Rowan found her in the library, staring at nothing. "I heard what happened," he said. "The whole village is talking about it. You handled it well." "Did I? Because I feel like I barely survived it." Eliza's laugh was hollow. "And that was just one attempt. How many more will there be before the festival?" "As many as it takes to break you." Rowan sat across from her. "That's Philip's strategy. Constant pressure, constant attacks, until you crack. I'm not going to crack. I know. Which is why he'll escalate. How much worse can it get? Rowan's expression was grim. Much worse. If public humiliation doesn't work, he'll try isolation, turning your allies against you one by one. And if that doesn't work, what? He'll attack me, or the estate directly, force my hand in ways that make you look like a liability I can't afford to keep. Eliza felt cold. You think he'd sabotage the estate just to get rid of me? Philip wants this inheritance more than anything. He spent his entire life being second, watching me inherit what he thinks should be his. If destroying you is what it takes to clear his path, he'll do it without hesitation. Then we need to be ready. For what exactly? We can't predict what he'll do next. No, Eliza agreed, but we can make sure that when he does strike, we have enough support that it doesn't matter. We need to turn this festival into more than just a showcase. We need to make it a declaration that I'm not going anywhere. Rowan studied her. You're not afraid of him. I'm terrified of him, Eliza corrected, but I'm more terrified of losing everything I've built here. The work, the relationships, the purpose. I can't go back to being nothing. I won't. You were never nothing. The words were quiet, but they hit like a physical blow. Eliza looked up sharply, finding Rowan watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When we married, he continued slowly, I thought I knew exactly what I was getting. A transaction, a means to an end. I never expected... He trailed off. Expected what? Someone who would fight this hard, who would care this much. His voice roughened. Someone who would make me question everything I thought I knew about what a marriage could be. Eliza's heart hammered. Rowan, a crash from outside cut her off, then shouting. They were on their feet instantly, running toward the noise. They found chaos in the entrance hall. Two of the estate workers were restraining a man Eliza didn't recognize, dirty, wild-eyed, struggling. He tried to force entry, one of the workers explained. Claimed he had a message for the Duchess. Started throwing things when we wouldn't let him through. I have a right, the man shouted. She needs to hear the truth. She needs to know what they're planning. Get him out, Rowan ordered. No, wait. Eliza moved closer. What truth? What are they planning? The man focused on her with desperate intensity. The festival. They're going to destroy it, ruin you. I heard them talking, Philip and his mother. They have a plan. Who are you? Rowan demanded. Daniel Reed. I work for Lord Philip's estate manager. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. What they're doing, it's wrong. What's the plan? Eliza asked urgently. What are they going to do? But Daniel Reed's eyes had rolled back. He collapsed, the workers barely catching him before he hit the floor. He's burning with fever, one of them said. Delirious. They carried him to a guest room. Dr. Matthews was summoned, examined him quickly, and delivered a grim diagnosis. Pneumonia. Advanced. He must have been sick for days before he came here. The doctor looked troubled. I can try to treat him, but his chances aren't good. Do what you can, Eliza said. For 3 days, Daniel Reed drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, more often raving. When he was coherent, he spoke in fragments about Philip's plans, but nothing concrete enough to act on. Mentions of sabotage, of timing, of making sure Eliza's house of cards collapsed at the worst possible moment. On the 4th day, he died. Eliza stood beside his bed, looking at the face of a man who'd tried to warn her and paid for it with his life. He worked for Philip, Rowan said quietly. Why would he betray him? Maybe he had a conscience, Eliza replied. Or maybe he just couldn't stomach whatever they're planning. Either way, we're no closer to knowing what it is. Eliza turned away from the dead man. Then we prepare for everything, every possible sabotage, every potential disaster. We build in redundancies, backup plans, fail-safes. Whatever Philip is plotting, we make sure it doesn't matter. But as they arranged for Daniel Reed's burial and returned to festival preparations, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. Some crucial piece of the puzzle that would make everything clear. The festival was 2 weeks away. And somewhere in the shadows, Philip was preparing to strike. They just didn't know how, or when, or what the cost would be when he finally made his move. They just didn't know how, or when, or what the cost would be when he finally made his move. Daniel Reed was buried on a gray morning in the estate cemetery, a small plot behind the old chapel where tenant families laid their dead. Eliza insisted on attending, despite Rowan's concerns about propriety. The man had died trying to warn her. The least she could do was witness his burial. Only a handful of people came. Dr. Matthews, Mrs. Brennan, 2 workers from Philip's estate who looked terrified to be there. And standing at the back, watching with cold calculation, was Philip himself. He approached Eliza after the brief service, his expression carefully neutral. "A tragedy," he said. "Poor Daniel. Always was a bit unstable, prone to delusions." "He wasn't delusional," Eliza replied quietly. "He was trying to warn me." "About what? My supposed plot against you?" Philip's smile was razor thin. "Really, cousin, this paranoia is unbecoming. Daniel was sick, fevered. Whatever he said was nonsense." "Then you won't mind if I investigate his claims." "Investigate all you like. You'll find nothing but the ramblings of a dying man." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "But perhaps that's the point, isn't it? Keeping you distracted, making you see threats everywhere, exhausting yourself chasing shadows until you're too tired to defend yourself when the real attack comes." He walked away before Eliza could respond, leaving her standing among the gravestones, cold certainty settling in her bones. Philip had just told her exactly what he was doing, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. The festival preparations consumed the next 10 days. Eliza barely slept, running on determination and too much tea, checking and rechecking every detail. The agricultural displays were set up in the north fields, demonstrations of the improved drainage, the new crop rotation, the yield increases. The education pavilion showcased student work, literacy improvements, enrollment numbers. The medical tent featured Dr. Matthews explaining the new health initiatives, complete with charts showing reduced mortality rates and faster recovery times. But the centerpiece was the financial exhibition, a bold, transparent display of estate accounts showing exactly where Eliza's reckless spending had gone and what it had produced. Increased productivity, higher tenant satisfaction, improved retention rates, every pound accounted for, every investment justified with measurable returns. "It's brilliant," Mrs. Brennan said, reviewing the final layout. "Or it will be if people actually look at the numbers." "They'll look," Eliza said with more confidence than she felt. "We're making it impossible to ignore." Rowan had thrown himself into the festival preparations with equal intensity, handling the business logistics while Eliza managed the social elements. They worked in tandem now, a partnership that had developed almost without them noticing. Late nights in the study discussing strategy, early mornings walking the festival grounds, checking preparations, stolen moments over breakfast comparing notes. The walls between them hadn't disappeared, but they'd become more like curtains. Still there, but easier to see through. 3 days before the festival, Eliza was inspecting the main pavilion when she found Rowan waiting for her, holding a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said without preamble. Eliza took the box, curious. Inside was a brooch, gold and emerald, exquisitely crafted in the shape of a flowering branch. "It was my mother's," Rowan said. "She wore it to every major estate event, said it reminded her why she was doing all of it, to help things grow." Eliza's throat tightened. "Rowan, I can't." "You can. You should." He met her eyes. "My mother would have wanted you to have it, and I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I want you to wear it, at the festival, as a statement." "A statement of what?" "That you're not just the Duchess in name. You're the Duchess in truth. The rightful inheritor of her legacy." His voice roughened. "That you belong here, no matter what Philip or anyone else claims." Eliza carefully lifted the brooch from the box, feeling the weight of it, the history. "Thank you," she whispered. Rowan reached out, his fingers brushing hers as he helped her pin it to her dress. The touch was brief, but it sent electricity through her skin. "We're going to survive this," he said quietly. "Both of us. Together." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was something real, something honest. And for now, it was enough. The night before the festival, Eliza couldn't sleep. She walked the manor halls, checking and rechecking preparations in her mind, looking for vulnerabilities. What would she do if she were Philip? Where would she strike? She was passing the library when she heard voices inside, low, intense, arguing. Moving quietly, she positioned herself near the partially open door. "Can't back out now." Philip's voice, sharp with frustration. Everything is ready. I'm not backing out, Lady Catherine, colder. I'm questioning the wisdom of such a public confrontation. If this fails, we'll have exposed ourselves for nothing. It won't fail. I've made sure of it. How? That foolish boy Daniel nearly ruined everything with his attack of conscience. Daniel is dead, and his ramblings were too vague to matter. Philip's voice carried complete confidence. Tomorrow, in front of the entire county, Eliza's carefully constructed illusion will collapse, and when it does, the family council will have no choice but to act. You're certain the documents are authentic? Completely. I had them verified 3 times. And the witnesses? Prepared and paid. They'll testify exactly as instructed. Eliza's heart hammered. Documents? Witnesses? What was Philip planning? What about Rowan? Lady Catherine asked. He's more invested in defending her than we anticipated. Rowan will have no choice. When the evidence is presented, he'll have to choose between his pride and his wife, and we both know which he'll choose. Philip's laugh was cruel. He's spent his entire life protecting the Ashford name. He won't sacrifice it for a woman he barely knows. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to burst in, confront them, demand to know what they were planning, but she forced herself to stay silent, to listen. The timing is crucial, Lady Catherine said. The announcement must come during the festival's peak, when the maximum number of influential witnesses are present. It will. I've arranged for Lord Westfield to call for a formal inquiry at exactly 3 o'clock, right when Eliza is supposed to give her presentation on estate improvements. Philip's satisfaction was audible. The contrast will be perfect. Her claims of success, immediately followed by evidence of fraud and mismanagement. What if she has documentation to counter it? She can't counter documents she doesn't know exist. And by the time she tries to defend herself, it will be too late. The damage will be done. They continued talking, but Eliza had heard enough. She moved away from the door, her mind racing. Philip had forged documents, financial records probably, showing mismanagement or embezzlement, and he had witnesses prepared to testify against her. It was a perfect trap. She couldn't defend against accusations she didn't know were coming based on evidence she'd never seen, unless she changed the game entirely. Eliza ran through the dark halls to Rowan's chambers, not caring about propriety or protocol. She knocked hard, urgency overriding everything else. He answered in his shirt sleeves, hair disheveled, clearly having been asleep. Eliza, what? I know what Philip's planning. She pushed past him into the room, words tumbling out. He has forged documents, financial records showing fraud or mismanagement, and witnesses paid to testify against me. He's going to present them tomorrow during the festival, during my presentation, in front of everyone. Rowan's expression went from confused to sharp-focused in seconds. How do you know this? I overheard him and Lady Catherine. In the library, they were going over the plan. Eliza paced, thinking frantically. Lord Westfield is going to call for a formal inquiry at 3 o'clock. That's the trigger, and then Philip will produce his evidence, and it won't matter how successful the festival is, because everyone will think I'm a fraud. Forged documents can be disproven, not immediately, not in the moment. By the time we prove they're fake, the damage will be done. Eliza stopped pacing, facing him. We need to expose him first, before he can make his accusations. How? We don't have his documents. We don't know exactly what he's planning to claim. No, but we know he's planning it. Eliza's thoughts crystallized into a plan, risky, dramatic, potentially disastrous. What if we force his hand? Make him reveal his strategy before he's ready? That's vague. What specifically? We announce an investigation, Eliza said. Tomorrow, at the festival, before 3 o'clock. We publicly declare that we've uncovered evidence of fraud and manipulation targeting the estate. We don't name Philip directly, but we make it clear we're investigating false documents and paid witnesses. Rowan stared at her. That's insane. We have no authority to... You're the Duke. You have absolute authority over estate matters. Eliza moved closer, willing him to understand. If we announce the investigation first, Philip's documents become evidence of the fraud we're already investigating. His witnesses become suspects. We flip the entire narrative. Or we look paranoid and defensive, exactly what he wants. Only if we do it wrong. Eliza's mind was working at lightning speed now. We frame it as protecting the estate from outside manipulation. We show the Clark family incident as an example, proof that someone has been orchestrating attacks against estate management. We present it as due diligence, not desperation. Rowan was quiet, thinking it through. She could see him testing the strategy from every angle, looking for weaknesses. It could work, he said finally. But it's a gamble. If we miscalculate, if Philip's documents are convincing enough to override our accusations, then we'll have lost publicly. I know. Eliza took a breath. But we're going to lose anyway if we wait for him to strike first. At least this way, we control the timing. Control is an illusion when you're working with incomplete information. Maybe. But I'd rather fail trying something bold than fail doing nothing. Rowan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You've changed, he said quietly. When we married, you were this quiet, careful person, trying so hard not to cause problems, and now you're proposing we start a public war at our own festival. You made me this way, Eliza said. You told me I was nothing but a means to an heir. You forced me to find power wherever I could. Well, I found it, and now I'm using it. I was wrong, Rowan said. The admission seemed to cost him something. About you. About what you were. What you could be. I was spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Does that change anything? Eliza asked. Everything, Rowan said. Or it should. But I don't know how to... He stopped, frustrated. I don't know how to be what you deserve. What you've earned. I only know how to be what I've always been. Cold, distant, controlled. Then learn, Eliza said softly. The way I learned how to be the Duchess. The way I learned how to fight. We're both capable of changing, Rowan. We just have to choose to do it. He reached out, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that shocked her. If we do this tomorrow, if we make this accusation, there's no going back. Philip will make it a war. Not just against you, but against both of us. I know. And you're still willing. Are you? Rowan's smile was sharp and dangerous. Let's burn his plan to the ground. They worked through the night, crafting the announcement, preparing the evidence they did have. The Clark family's confession, testimony from Daniel Reed's colleagues about his character, financial records showing the estate's actual health. It wasn't enough to prove Philip's specific plot, but it was enough to create doubt, to frame the narrative in their favor. At dawn, Eliza finally returned to her rooms to change. She chose her dress carefully, elegant but not ostentatious, the deep green that brought out her eyes, and pinned to her shoulder, catching the early morning light, her mother-in-law's emerald brooch. The festival grounds opened at 10 o'clock. By 10:30, the fields were packed with people, tenant families, merchants, neighboring landowners, curious visitors from across the county. The agricultural displays drew crowds, people exclaiming over the yield comparisons and improved systems. The education pavilion was mobbed with parents proud to see their children's work displayed. The medical tent had a line of people waiting to speak with Dr. Matthews. Eliza moved through it all, greeting people, accepting congratulations, playing her role perfectly. But underneath, her nerves were steel wires, taut and thrumming. At 2 o'clock, she gave her presentation on estate improvements. She'd practiced it a dozen times, knew every word, every statistic. The crowd was large, attentive, and she delivered it flawlessly, the story of what they'd accomplished in 6 months, backed by irrefutable data. The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. People crowded forward with questions and compliments. And across the crowd, she saw Philip watching, his expression confident, waiting for 3 o'clock, when Lord Westfield would call for the inquiry and everything would come crashing down. At 2:45, Rowan stepped onto the main platform. The crowd quieted, sensing something important. Philip's expression sharpened, confusion flickering across his face. Thank you all for attending today, Rowan began, his voice carrying across the grounds. This festival celebrates the remarkable progress our estate has made under the Duchess's leadership. But it also serves another purpose, transparency. He paused, letting the word settle. Recently, we've become aware of attempts to undermine estate management through fraud and manipulation, false accusations, forged documents, paid witnesses making fabricated claims. His voice hardened. Someone has been orchestrating a campaign to damage the estate's reputation and leadership, and we will not tolerate it. The crowd erupted in whispers. Eliza saw Philip's face go white, then red. Therefore, Rowan continued, I'm announcing a formal investigation into these attempts at sabotage. We will identify those responsible and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. Anyone with information about fraudulent documents or paid testimony is encouraged to come forward. He locked eyes with Philip across the crowd. And I want to be absolutely clear. This estate and the Duchess who manages it are under my complete protection. Any attack on her authority is an attack on the Ashford name itself, and I will defend both with every resource at my disposal. The applause was thunderous, but Eliza barely heard it. She was watching Philip, watching his careful plan dissolve in real time. Lord Westfield, who had been positioned near the platform, looked uncertain now. His call for inquiry would seem suspicious, possibly incriminating. Whatever Philip had paid him to do, the risk had just skyrocketed. He didn't call for the inquiry. Instead, he quietly melted back into the crowd. Philip stood frozen for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, he pasted on a smile and began moving through the crowd, playing the part of supportive family member. But Eliza saw the fury in his eyes, the desperate recalculation. She'd won this round. But the game wasn't over. The festival continued successfully into the evening. As the sun set, Eliza found herself standing on a small hill overlooking the grounds, watching lanterns flicker to life across the fields. Below, people laughed and celebrated, their joy genuine. "You should be down there," Rowan said, joining her, accepting their gratitude. "I needed a moment to breathe." She glanced at him. "We did it. Your announcement worked. Philip couldn't make his move. Not today, but he will try again." "I know." Eliza turned back to the view. "Do you think it will ever end? This constant fighting? With Philip? Probably not. Not until—" He stopped. "Until what?" "Until we give him what he actually wants," Rowan said quietly. "Which is impossible unless I die without an heir." The words hung heavy between them. The unspoken issue that underlay everything, they were married, but their marriage was still essentially unconsummated beyond the clinical attempts to produce an heir. No real intimacy, no genuine partnership beyond estate management. "Rowan," Eliza said carefully, "what do you want? Not from the estate, not from duty. From us." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I want to stop being afraid," he said finally, "of caring, of being vulnerable, of letting someone matter enough to hurt me." He looked at her. "I've spent 5 years building walls, and you've spent 6 months dismantling them without even trying. It's terrifying." "I'm terrified too," Eliza admitted, "of wanting more than what we have, of hoping this could become real instead of just strategic." "What if it already is real? What if it's been real for a while now and we've both been too stubborn or scared to acknowledge it?" Eliza's breath caught. "Then we'd have to decide what to do about it." "Yes," Rowan agreed, "we would." They stood in the growing darkness, the festival lights twinkling below like fallen stars, both of them on the edge of something that felt more dangerous than any of Philip's plots. "I don't know how to be in a real marriage," Rowan said. "I've never learned." "Neither have I. We'd have to figure it out together." "That sounds difficult." "Everything worth doing is difficult," Eliza said. "You taught me that." Rowan's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. "Tomorrow," he said, "Philip will regroup. He'll come at us another way. Let him try." Eliza squeezed his hand. "We're stronger together than he anticipated, and we're only getting stronger." "You sound confident." "I am. Because I have something Philip will never have." "What's that?" "People who actually believe in me, who fight for me because they want to, not because they're paid to." She looked up at him. "Including you." Rowan pulled her closer, and for the first time since their wedding night, he kissed her. Not perfunctory or clinical, but real, full of hesitation and hope, and the promise of something neither of them had dared to imagine. When they pulled apart, Eliza was breathless. "That was," she started. "Long overdue," Rowan finished, "and entirely insufficient, but it's a start." "A start," Eliza agreed, smiling despite everything. "I can work with that." They walked back down to the festival together, hand in hand, and Eliza felt something shift fundamentally. The battle wasn't over. Philip would strike again, probably soon, But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she didn't feel alone in fighting it. The next morning brought the consequences of their bold move. 3 landowners who had pledged support for the festival sent letters withdrawing their endorsements, citing concerns about the Duke's accusations. 2 tenant families requested transfers to other estates, frightened by talk of investigations and prosecutions. And Lady Catherine sent a formal letter demanding a family council meeting to address the disturbing allegations and unseemly public spectacle. "She's calling in reinforcements," Mrs. Brennan said, reading the letter with disgust. "Trying to turn the family against you." "Let her try," Eliza said. "We have the truth on our side." But when Rowan called her to his study later that morning, his expression was grim. Philip's response arrived, he said, handing her a thick envelope. Inside was a formal complaint to the county magistrate, accusing Eliza of slander, defamation, and making false accusations against a peer of the realm. It demanded an immediate retraction and public apology, and included threats of legal action if the baseless investigation continued. "He's trying to make us back down," Eliza said, reading through the legal language. "More than that, he's creating an official record that positions him as the victim." Rowan pointed to a particular clause. "Look at the wording. He's claiming our accusations are proof of irrational behavior and poor judgment. He's building a case for incompetence." "For the family council." "Exactly. If we pursue the investigation, we're vindictive and unstable. If we drop it, we're admitting we made false accusations. Either way, we lose credibility." Eliza set down the document, thinking hard. "What if we don't drop the investigation, but we don't pursue Philip either?" "I don't follow. We investigate the broader pattern of interference, the Clark family incident, Daniel Reed's warnings, the attempts to undermine estate management. We document everything, build a case, but we don't formally accuse anyone until we have irrefutable proof." She looked at Rowan. "We turn it from a vendetta into due diligence, protecting the estate from corruption, not attacking your cousin. That could work, but it requires actually finding evidence. Then we find it." Eliza stood. "Daniel Reed worked for Philip's estate manager. There must be records, correspondence, something that proves the connection. Breaking into another estate's records would be—" "I'm not suggesting we break in," Eliza interrupted. "I'm suggesting we convince people with access to those records to share them. People who might be tired of Philip's schemes and willing to help." Rowan studied her. "You're talking about recruiting informants from inside his organization. I'm talking about giving honest people a chance to do the right thing. There must be someone in Philip's household who's troubled by what he's doing." It was a long shot, but 3 days later it paid off in an unexpected way. A young woman appeared at the manor's servants' entrance, asking urgently to speak with the Duchess. Her name was Sarah, and she'd worked as a maid in Lady Catherine's household for 2 years. "I can't stay long," she said, hands twisting nervously. "But I heard about your investigation, and I thought you should know. Lady Catherine has been keeping correspondence. Letters between her and Lord Philip, planning everything. They're in her private study, locked in a desk drawer." "Why are you telling us this?" Eliza asked gently. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because Daniel Reed was my brother. He tried to do the right thing, and it killed him. I won't let them destroy you the way they destroyed him." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "I'm so sorry about your brother. He was brave. He was foolish. But he was good." Sarah wiped her eyes. "The letters are in the 3rd drawer, left side. She keeps the key in a music box on the mantel. I don't know if that helps, but it helps enormously," Rowan said. "Thank you, Sarah. And you have my word, we'll make sure your brother didn't die for nothing." After Sarah left, Eliza and Rowan looked at each other. "We need those letters," Eliza said. "Stealing private correspondence is illegal. If we're caught, then we don't get caught." Eliza's mind was already working through possibilities. "Lady Catherine is hosting a card party next week. Half the county will be there, including us. While everyone's distracted, you want to steal the letters during a social event?" Rowan's expression was caught between horror and admiration. "That's incredibly risky." "Everything we've done has been risky. At least this time we have a specific target and insider information." Eliza met his eyes. "But I won't do it without your support. If you think it's too dangerous—" "I think it's dangerous and necessary," Rowan interrupted. "And I think we do it together. No more you taking risks alone." The card party was exactly the kind of event Eliza had learned to navigate. Superficial conversations, strategic flattery, everyone watching everyone else for signs of weakness or advantage. She and Rowan arrived together, presenting a united front that drew speculative looks and whispered comments. Lady Catherine greeted them with icy politeness. How delightful that you could attend. I trust the festival aftermath hasn't been too exhausting. Not at all, Eliza replied smoothly. In fact, we've been quite energized. So much to investigate, so many interesting leads to follow. The barb landed. Lady Catherine's smile tightened. The party progressed through its predictable stages, cards, gossip, thinly veiled political maneuvering. Eliza played her role perfectly, all while mentally timing the evening, waiting for the right moment. At 10 o'clock, Lady Catherine excused herself to supervise refreshment preparations. The guests were absorbed in their games, distracted and comfortable. Eliza caught Rowan's eye. He gave the barest nod. She slipped away, moving through the manor's halls with purpose and confidence, like she belonged there, like she was simply looking for a powder room or a moment of privacy. Lady Catherine's private study was on the second floor, exactly where Sarah had described it. The door was unlocked. Eliza's heart pounded as she entered, closing the door softly behind her. The music box was on the mantel, ornate and beautiful. Inside, nestled among silk lining, was a small brass key. Third drawer, left side. Eliza opened it with shaking hands and found exactly what Sarah had promised. A bundle of letters, tied with ribbon, addressed in Philip's distinctive handwriting. She didn't have time to read them. She quickly untied the ribbon, laid out the letters, and used the small camera she'd brought, borrowed from a traveling photographer who'd documented the festival, to photograph each page. It was faster than copying by hand, but still agonizingly slow. Every second felt like an hour. Every sound in the hallway made her freeze. She was photographing the last letter when she heard footsteps approaching. No time to put everything back. Eliza quickly gathered the letters, retied the ribbon, shoved them in the drawer, locked it, and was replacing the key in the music box when the door opened. Lady Catherine stood in the doorway, her expression transforming from surprise to cold fury. "What?" she said with deadly precision. "Are you doing in my private study?" Eliza's mind raced. She couldn't run. Lady Catherine was blocking the door. She couldn't lie convincingly. She'd obviously been caught. So she did the only thing she could. She attacked. "Looking for these," Eliza said, pulling the photographed images from her pocket. She'd stored the first few there. "Your correspondence with Philip. All your careful planning, all your schemes documented in your own words." Lady Catherine went pale. "You had no right." "And you had no right to orchestrate a campaign to destroy me," Eliza shot back. "But here we are. So let me be very clear, Lady Catherine. If you pursue your family council meeting, if you continue trying to undermine my position, these letters become public. Every lord and lady in the county will know exactly what you and Philip have been plotting." "That's blackmail." "That's self-defense," Eliza corrected. "You started this war. I'm just ensuring I survive it." They stared at each other, two women locked in a battle neither had expected. "You've changed," Lady Catherine said finally. "When I first met you, you were a frightened girl playing at being Duchess. Now you're something else." "Now I'm the actual Duchess," Eliza said, "and I'm not going anywhere." Lady Catherine's laugh was bitter. "You think you've won? This isn't over, child. You may have those letters, but Philip has resources you can't imagine. Allies. Plans within plans. Whatever small victory you think you've achieved tonight is nothing compared to what's coming." "Let it come," Eliza said. "I'm ready." She walked past Lady Catherine, out of the study, down the stairs, and back into the party. Her hands were shaking, her heart racing, but her head was high. Rowan found her in the garden, where she'd escaped for air. "Did you get them?" he asked. "Most of them. Photographed, not stolen. She caught me before I finished, but I got enough." Eliza showed him the images. "And I may have just declared total war with your aunt." "Good," Rowan said, surprising her. "I'm tired of careful strategies and polite battles. If we're doing this, let's actually do it." He pulled her close, and Eliza let herself lean into him, drawing strength from his presence. "We're really in this now," she said. "No going back." "No going back," Rowan agreed. "But we're in it together, and that makes all the difference." "No going back," Rowan agreed. "But we're in it together, and that makes all the difference." They developed the photographs the next morning in a darkroom Mrs. Brennan had miraculously procured. Apparently, the late Duchess had dabbled in photography. The images were clear enough, the handwriting unmistakable. Letter after letter detailing the campaign against Eliza, the forged documents Philip had commissioned, the witnesses he'd paid, even discussions about how to manipulate the family council. "This is damning," Rowan said, studying one particular exchange where Lady Catherine advised Philip on which family members would be most susceptible to pressure. "But we need to be strategic about how we use it." "Strategic how? We show these to everyone, Philip and Lady Catherine are finished. And we look vindictive, like we're using stolen correspondence to destroy family members." Rowan set down the photograph. "The court of public opinion doesn't always reward the person who's right. Sometimes it punishes the person who fights too dirty." Eliza wanted to argue, but she knew he was correct. "So what do? We wait. Keep these as insurance, and we let Philip make the next move." Rowan's expression was calculating. "He doesn't know we have these letters. He'll assume we're bluffing, that we caught Catherine off guard but got nothing substantial. So he'll keep pushing, and when he does, we'll have proof of everything." Eliza understood now. "We let him hang himself." Exactly. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, a formal summons arrived. The Ashford Family Council had been convened for the following week, at the request of Lord Philip Ashford and Lady Catherine Ashford, to address serious concerns regarding estate management and the suitability of the current Duchess. "They're moving faster than I expected," Rowan said, reading the summons with a frown. "Usually these councils take weeks to organize." "They're scared," Eliza said. "Lady Catherine knows we have something on her, even if she doesn't know exactly what. They want to strike before we can use it. Or they're confident enough to think it won't matter." Rowan handed her the summons. "The council consists of 12 family members, elders mostly, with voting rights on family matters. Philip and Catherine will present their case against you. We'll have a chance to defend. Then the council votes on whether to take action." Action meaning what exactly? "Could range from a formal censure to removal of your authority over estate matters. In extreme cases, they could recommend annulment of the marriage." His voice was carefully neutral, but Eliza saw tension in his jaw. "It depends on how convincing their case is. And how convincing our defense is." "Yes." Eliza took a breath, steadying herself. "Then we'd better be very convincing." The week before the council meeting was a blur of preparation. Rowan coached Eliza on family politics, who held influence, who could be swayed, who was already in Philip's pocket. Mrs. Brennan helped organize documentation of every estate improvement, every financial decision, every success story. They prepared rebuttals for every accusation they could anticipate, but it was the letters that would be their nuclear option. The proof they'd keep hidden until the exact right moment. "You understand," Rowan said the night before the meeting, "that once we reveal those letters, there's no repairing the family relationships. Philip and Catherine will never forgive it." "They were never going to forgive me for existing," Eliza replied. "At least this way they can't destroy me in the process." "You're sure you want to do this? There might be another way." "There isn't." Eliza met his eyes. "We both know that. This has always been heading toward confrontation. Better to face it on our terms than theirs." Rowan reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. They'd been doing that more often lately, small touches, deliberate closeness. The wall between them hadn't disappeared, but it had developed a door, and they were both learning how to open it. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "I want you to know that I don't regret this. Any of it. Marrying you, defending you, standing with you against my own family. If I could go back and choose differently—" "Don't." Eliza squeezed his hand. "Don't second guess. We're here now. That's what matters. You're remarkable, you know that? The way you've handled all of this, the attacks, the pressure, the constant fighting. Most people would have broken. I nearly did, several times." She smiled without humor. "But then I'd remember what you told me on our wedding night, that I was nothing more than a means to an heir, and I'd get angry all over again, angry enough to keep fighting. I was wrong about that. About you." Rowan's voice roughened. "About what we could be to each other. I spent so long convinced that marriage had to be a transaction, that anything else was weakness. And then you showed me what strength actually looks like, which is caring anyway, even when it's hard. Even when people hurt you, even when it would be easier to stop. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I'm still learning, but I want to, with you. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. That's the most you've said to me about feelings in our entire marriage. I'm not good at this. Neither am I. She moved closer, resting her forehead against his. But we're trying. That's more than a lot of marriages have. They stayed like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. Tomorrow would be brutal, but tonight they had this. Fragile and new, but real. The family council convened in the formal dining hall of Ashford Manor, converted for the occasion into something resembling a courtroom. 12 family members sat at the long table, uncles, aunts, cousins twice removed, all dressed formally, all wearing expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Philip sat at one end of the table, Lady Catherine beside him, both looking confident and prepared. Rowan and Eliza sat opposite, Mrs. Brennan behind them with their documentation. Lord Ashford, Rowan's uncle and the council's chairman, called the meeting to order. We're here to address concerns raised by Lord Philip and Lady Catherine regarding the management of Ashford Estate and the conduct of the current Duchess. His voice was grave, judicial. Lord Philip, you may present your case. Philip stood, every inch the concerned family member. Thank you, Uncle. I take no pleasure in bringing these matters forward, but my loyalty to the Ashford name compels me to speak. He laid out his case with devastating precision. Eliza's reckless spending that had depleted household reserves, her unauthorized decisions made without proper consultation, her manipulation of tenant relationships to build personal loyalty rather than institutional stability, her inexperience and poor judgment that made her fundamentally unsuitable for the role of Duchess. He presented financial records, carefully selected to show expenditures without their corresponding benefits. He brought character witnesses, landowners who testified to their concerns about estate management. He painted a picture of an estate teetering on the edge of disaster, all because an incompetent young woman had been given authority she didn't deserve. It was masterfully done. Eliza watched the council members' faces, saw doubt creep in, saw the narrative taking hold. When Philip finished, the silence was heavy. Lady Ashford, Lord Ashford said, you may respond. Eliza stood, feeling the weight of 12 pairs of eyes judging her. She'd prepared a speech, carefully crafted rebuttals, documentation to counter every claim. But looking at their faces, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some already convinced she was guilty, she made a different choice. Lord Philip is right, she said. The room erupted. Rowan's head snapped toward her, confusion and concern flashing across his face. Philip looked shocked, then triumphant. I am inexperienced, Eliza continued, her voice cutting through the noise. I've been Duchess for less than a year. I didn't grow up in this world, don't have decades of training in estate management. And yes, I made decisions quickly, sometimes without extensive consultation, because there were problems that had been ignored for 5 years, and people who couldn't wait any longer for help. She pulled out her own documents, spreading them across the table. But let's talk about what that inexperience actually produced. Tenant productivity up 23%. Staff retention at a 10-year high. Medical emergency response time cut in half. Education enrollment increased by 40%. And estate profitability, she locked eyes with Philip, up 17% over last year, despite the reckless spending Lord Philip is so concerned about. She walked around the table, placing documents in front of each council member. Every pound I spent is accounted for here. Every decision justified with measurable results. And if you read these testimonials from the tenant families, the staff, the merchants who work with the estate, you'll see that what Lord Philip calls manipulation, they call leadership. What he calls poor judgment, they call compassion. Numbers can be manipulated, Philip interjected. Testimonials can be coerced. Can they? Eliza turned to face him directly. Then explain something to me, Philip. If I'm so incompetent, why have you spent 6 months trying to destroy me? Why forge documents? Why pay witnesses to lie? Why coordinate with your mother to orchestrate a systematic campaign to undermine my authority? I've done no such thing. Haven't you? Eliza's voice was steel. Because I have evidence that says otherwise. She nodded to Rowan, who pulled out the photographs of the letters. These are correspondence between Lord Philip and Lady Catherine, detailing their plans to discredit me. Discussions about forged financial documents, lists of people they paid to make false accusations, strategies for manipulating this very council into removing me. Eliza distributed copies around the table, all in their own handwriting, all dated and documented. The council erupted into chaos. Members grabbed the photographs, reading with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Lady Catherine had gone deathly pale. Philip's confident mask was cracking, fury and panic warring beneath it. "Those are private correspondence," Lady Catherine began. "Those are evidence of conspiracy," Rowan cut in, standing beside Eliza. "Evidence that everything my wife has been accused of is projection. You want to talk about manipulation and poor judgment? Let's discuss the family members who've been orchestrating a campaign of fraud and defamation against the Duchess of Ashford." "You stole those letters!" Philip's composure shattered completely. "Breaking into my mother's home, violating her privacy. Interesting that your concern is how we obtained them, not whether they're authentic," Eliza said quietly. "You're not denying what they say, Philip. You're just angry we found out." Lord Ashford read through the letters with increasing gravity. When he looked up, his expression was thunderous. "Is this true?" he demanded, looking between Philip and Catherine. "Did you forge documents? Pay false witnesses?" "We were trying to protect the family," Lady Catherine started. "By destroying its integrity?" Lord Ashford's voice cracked like a whip. "By engaging in fraud and conspiracy? By attacking the Duke's wife with lies and manipulation? She doesn't belong here." Philip's control was gone entirely now, his true feelings spilling out. "She's nobody, from nowhere, with no right to this position. She's spending our money, making decisions about our estate, building power that should belong to actual Ashford family members." "I am an actual Ashford family member," Eliza said. "By marriage, by law, and by the work I've done to earn this position, which is more than you can say about your inheritance, Philip. You've spent your entire life waiting for something you didn't earn, and when it didn't fall into your lap fast enough, you decided to destroy anyone standing in your way. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth?" Eliza was done being careful, done being diplomatic. "You've accused me of incompetence, but the only incompetent management this estate has seen was the 5 years before I arrived. You've accused me of manipulation, but you're the one who's been scheming and lying. You've questioned my right to be Duchess, but I've proven that right every single day through actual work, while you've proven nothing except that you're willing to betray your own family for personal gain. The silence that followed was absolute. Then quietly, one of the older council members, an aunt Eliza had met briefly at the wedding, spoke up. "I visited the estate last month," she said, "saw the improvements myself, spoke with tenant families. Everything Lady Ashford is claiming about the estate's improvement, I can verify it. The difference from 5 years ago is remarkable." Another council member nodded. "I've reviewed the financial reports independently. The numbers support her claims. The estate is thriving." "And I've known Philip his entire life," a third added, looking at him with disappointment. "This kind of scheming is exactly what I'd expect from him. Always looking for shortcuts, always convinced he deserves what others have earned." The tide was turning. Eliza could see it in faces around the table. Shock giving way to understanding, doubt transforming into support. Lord Ashford stood, his decision clear in his bearing. "This council finds no grounds to question Lady Ashford's management of the estate. In fact, her tenure as Duchess has been exemplary." His voice was formal, final. "However, we do find serious concerns regarding Lord Philip's conduct and Lady Catherine's participation in fraudulent activities against a family member." "Uncle, please," Philip began. "You will be silent." Lord Ashford's authority was absolute. "Pending further investigation, both of you are suspended from any official family business. Your voting rights on this council are revoked, and you will issue formal apologies to the Duke and Duchess for your conduct. I will not. You will, or you'll be formally expelled from the family entirely. Is that clear?" Philip's face went through a series of expressions: rage, humiliation, calculation. Finally, with visible effort, he managed a stiff nod. Lady Catherine was already standing, gathering her things with shaking hands. "This is not over," she said quietly, looking at Eliza with pure venom. "You may have won today, but it is over," Rowan said, his voice carrying complete authority. "And if either of you attempts anything remotely similar to this campaign ever again, these letters become public record. Every lord and lady in England will know exactly what you've done. You'll be social pariahs. Is that understood?" The threat landed. Lady Catherine's mouth thinned into a bitter line, but she nodded. Philip and his mother left the council chamber without another word, their defeat absolute and public. After they'd gone, Lord Ashford turned to Eliza and Rowan. "I apologize," he said simply, "for doubting you, Lady Ashford, and for not seeing what Philip was doing sooner." "Thank you," Eliza managed, still processing what had just happened. The other council members approached one by one, offering congratulations, apologies, support. By the time the chamber cleared, Eliza felt wrung out, exhausted, and somehow lighter than she'd been in months. "We won," she said to Rowan, the reality of it just sinking in. "You won," he corrected. "I just stood beside you. That's all I needed. Someone standing beside me." She leaned against him, letting herself feel the relief. "Is it really over? The war with Philip? Probably not entirely. But this battle, yes, it's over. And you won decisively." Rowan wrapped his arms around her. "The entire family witnessed it. They know now what you're capable of, what we're capable of together." They stood like that for a long moment. Two people who'd started as strangers bound by obligation and somehow become partners in the truest sense. "What happens now?" Eliza asked, finally. "Now?" Rowan pulled back enough to look at her. "Now we actually live. Not just survive, not just fight. We build the life we want instead of the one we were forced into." "And what do you want from that life?" Rowan's smile was slow and genuine, the walls finally fully down. "I want mornings where we have breakfast together and actually talk. I want to work beside you managing this estate we've both invested everything in. I want—" He hesitated, vulnerability clear in his expression. "I want to know you, really know you, not just as the Duchess or my strategic partner, but as Eliza, the woman who refused to break, who fought for people she barely knew, who somehow saw something worth saving in a marriage that started as a transaction." Eliza felt tears threaten. "I want that too, all of it." "Then let's have it." He kissed her, and it was different from before. Not tentative or testing, but certain. A promise and a beginning. The weeks that followed were strange in their normalcy. No attacks from Philip, who'd retreated to his estate and was reportedly considering a prolonged trip abroad to let things settle. Lady Catherine had withdrawn entirely from county society, her influence broken. The other family members who'd witnessed the council confrontation spread the story, and Eliza's reputation shifted from questionable outsider to formidable duchess who'd defeated a conspiracy against her. But more than the external validation, what mattered was the internal shift. Eliza and Rowan began the careful, awkward, ultimately rewarding work of actually building a marriage. Shared meals became conversations instead of obligations. Estate management became collaboration instead of parallel work. The physical relationship they'd maintained perfunctorily became something intimate and genuine. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes, Rowan's tendency to withdraw when stressed, clashing with Eliza's need to process everything verbally. She sometimes made decisions too quickly for his methodical nature. He sometimes retreated into old coldness when emotions got too intense. But they were trying, and that made all the difference. 3 months after the council meeting, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. The estate doctor confirmed it with gentle congratulations, and Eliza sat in his office afterward, trying to process the magnitude of it. This was what Rowan had married her for. An heir. The entire point of their transaction. Except it wasn't a transaction anymore. She found Rowan in his study, reviewing crop reports. He looked up when she entered, immediately reading her expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Eliza closed the door behind her. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. Rowan went very still. "Are you certain?" "Dr. Matthews is certain, about 6 weeks along." Rowan stood slowly, crossing to her. His hands cupped her face, his eyes searching hers. "How do you feel about it?" The question surprised her. Not, "This is good news," or "Finally an heir," but asking how she felt. "Terrified," Eliza admitted, "and hopeful. And I don't know, it's complicated. Because of how we started," Rowan said quietly. "Because an heir was supposed to be the goal, the end point. And now Now it's not an endpoint. It's just another beginning. Eliza covered his hands with hers. I'm not afraid of having your child, Rowan. I'm afraid of not being good enough, of failing at this the way I almost failed at everything else. You haven't failed at anything. You've transformed this estate, defeated a conspiracy, won over an entire community. If you can do all that, you can certainly manage one very small human. His smile was tender. And you won't be doing it alone. We're partners now. In everything. Even in terrifying new parenthood? Especially in that. Eliza let herself relax into his embrace, feeling the rightness of it. This child would be born into a real marriage, a real partnership. Not the cold transaction their union had started as, but something warm and genuine. I love you, she said, the words spilling out before she could overthink them. I don't know when it happened. Maybe gradually over months, maybe all at once during one of our battles. But I do love you. Rowan's arms tightened around her. I love you too. Even though I spent half a year trying to convince myself I didn't, that I couldn't. His laugh was rough. You terrified me from the beginning, not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough to make me feel things I'd sworn I'd never feel again. What changed? You did, or I did, or we did together. He pulled back to look at her. I stopped being afraid of what loving you might cost me and started being afraid of what not loving you would cost instead. And I realized there was no contest. They stood together in his study. Their study now, really, since she'd colonized half of it with her estate management work. And Eliza felt the final piece of her transformation click into place. She'd come to Ashford Manor as a transaction, a means to an end, nothing more than what her family needed her to be. She'd survived coldness and rejection, had clawed her way to relevance and purpose through sheer determination. She'd fought battles public and private, had faced down enemies and her own doubts. And somewhere in all of that, she'd stopped being the frightened girl in the wedding dress and become someone she actually respected. Someone who fought for what mattered. Someone who built instead of just enduring. The Duchess of Ashford. Not in name only, but in truth. 6 months later, Eliza stood in the nursery, watching her daughter sleep. Margaret Rose Ashford, named for both her grandmothers, was 2 weeks old and already showing signs of her mother's stubborn determination. She'd come 3 weeks early and fought her way into the world with impressive force. The birth had been difficult. Eliza had nearly died from blood loss, had spent 3 days in a fever delirium while Rowan refused to leave her side. But she'd survived, and their daughter had survived, and now here they were. Rowan entered quietly, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She's perfect, he murmured. She's terrifying, Eliza corrected. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. He kissed the top of her head. Mrs. Brennan says the tenant families have been sending gifts. Apparently half the estate wants to meet the new heir. She's 2 weeks old, and already more popular than either of us. Rowan's smile was evident in his voice. They're planning a celebration, once you're recovered enough to attend. Eliza thought about the tenant families she'd fought so hard for, who'd defended her when Philip attacked, who'd become not just her responsibility, but her community. I'd like that, to celebrate with them. Good, because they've already started planning. They stood together in the quiet nursery, watching their daughter sleep, and Eliza felt something she'd never expected to feel in this house. Peace. The war was over. Not just with Philip, but with herself, with the expectations and doubts that had haunted her. She'd proven what she was capable of. She'd built something real from nothing. She'd transformed a transaction into a partnership, a cold house, into a home, a broken marriage into something worth fighting for. Do you ever think about it? Rowan asked quietly. That first night, what we said to each other. All the time. I was cruel to you. Unforgivably cruel. You were honest, Eliza said. In a terrible way, but honest. And maybe I needed that. Needed to understand exactly what I was up against so I could fight it properly. Still, if I could take it back, don't. Eliza turned in his arms to face him. Don't take it back, because it made me angry enough to fight, strong enough to survive, and eventually brave enough to love you despite everything. She touched his face gently. We wouldn't be here if we'd started differently. This version of us, the real, earned version, only exists because we had to fight for it. Rowan kissed her, soft and reverent. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. Best mistake I ever made marrying you. It wasn't a mistake, Eliza said. It was a transaction that became something better. Because we chose to make it better. Margaret stirred in her crib, making small, unhappy noises. Eliza moved to pick her up, cradling her daughter against her chest. The baby settled immediately, her tiny fist gripping Eliza's finger with surprising strength. She's going to be formidable, Rowan observed. She's an Ashford. She doesn't have a choice. Eliza smiled down at her daughter. But she'll also know she's loved, not because of what she can provide or what she represents, just because she exists. The way you love, Rowan said softly, teaching by example. The way we love, Eliza corrected, both of us. They stood together in the nursery, a family built from broken pieces and fierce determination, and Eliza understood finally that this was the real victory. Not defeating Philip, not winning the council's approval, not even transforming the estate. The real victory was this, standing in a room with the people she loved, knowing she'd earned her place here, knowing she belonged. The Duchess of Ashford had started as a title thrust upon her, a cage disguised as opportunity. But she'd made it something else entirely. A foundation for power built not on inheritance or transaction, but on competence and compassion and the sheer refusal to be less than she could be. And that, Eliza thought, watching her daughter sleep while her husband's arms wrapped around them both, was worth every battle she'd fought to get here. The war was over. The real life was just beginning. And she was ready for it.